So Corinne's next to us.
All right, we're going to call to order the January 16th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council. Chris, calling to order the. The light's on. The mute button's not off. There we go. All right, we're going to call to order the January 16th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, Redevelopment, Successor Agency, and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight is going to be led by Seamus Laffey.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding the properties listed in the agenda in negotiations with Reclamation District 537 and Reclamation District 900, to confer with our legal counsel regarding an October 10th, 2018 letter from Scott Rafferty under substantial exposure to litigation, and to authorize initiation of one matter of litigation. All right, with that, then we're going to proceed to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, the Council is prohibited by state law from taking action or having a substantial discussion on items brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available near the front door, and to turn that card into the city clerk. In front of the city clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everyone gets a chance to be heard, and to that end we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart that simply indicates which agenda item the council is currently considering. We take the cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on any particular agenda item. Once the staff report's concluded and the council questions and public testimony has begun, we don't take additional cards. So if you're here for a specific agenda item, just encourage you to turn the card in as soon as you can, but certainly before the end of the staff report. And then finally, we recognize that for some folks, coming to a public meeting and testifying on television can be a little bit nerve-wracking. So we do ask that there not be any boos or catcalls or even applause or other demonstrations, and that we try to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, it looks like we have just one request to speak under item 1A, and that's by Rosie Ramsey.
You should have two, Mr. Mayor, sorry.
I do have to, thank you. Yes, come on up. Welcome.
Hi. Hi. My name is Rosie Ramsey. I'm supposed to say something else. In light of, I know this is probably going to be brought up in future meetings, maybe even in February, but I would like to volunteer if there's going to be any sort of committee looking into getting us in SMUD. Because I think in light of PG&E going under and so many people being pro-SMUD now, and the fact that Sacramento kind of shares our water, that we maybe could get Sacramento even on our side to vote this time for us being part of SMUD. That's all. And so I volunteer, if you set up some kind of committee, that I would do it.
All right. Thanks so much. All right, and Steve Patek.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Stephen Patek, West Sacramento. I always wanted to come up on matters not on the agenda. I was really tempted at the time to pick up the mantle of Bill Lowell and come down every week and tell you how to do things that are not within your jurisdiction, but I decided not to do that. Actually, I'm going here to make an unabashed commercial. The reason I am dressed as informally as I am is as a retired person, if I wear a collared shirt, that's getting all dressed up, but also because along with about a dozen other people who are members of the West Sacramento Community Emergency Response Team, we are on call tonight. Community Response Team is a group of citizens who have gone through a training process on how to deal with emergencies, prepare for emergencies in your own home, but also to train in dealing with mass emergencies and to be in a position to, as we may be called on tonight, come out and supplement the professional emergency management personnel. We're about to get hit with about 3 hours of heavy rain and 60-mile-an-hour winds, and if there's some trees blowing down, which is entirely possible, and enough of that happens at the same time, we are available to come out and, we're not going to be running chainsaws or axes, but maybe we provide traffic control. Maybe we free up some folks who are more trained to do things that they're more capable of doing. We do have a new academy starting in March. That's about a 10-hour training course that people can go through to get training on some medical and search and rescue and hazmat and utilities and so on and so forth. And I would urge anyone who might be interested to contact the Fire Admin Building Department in Station 45. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's great seeing you, and thank you so much for coming tonight, and for your service, and for all your colleagues in the Community Emergency Response Team. You're exactly right. I mean, that our ability to respond to disasters big and small, and emergencies big and small, they depend on a lot of things working. Our excellent emergency response and public safety personnel here in the city, from police and fire, also public works, and others in the city departments, but and our partners in other agencies, but critically on the volunteers in the CERT program. Also in each one of us to do our own part, to be prepared, to not make foolish choices in the middle of an emergency, to do what we can to minimize the burden that we put onto the emergency response system when there's an actual emergency occurring. But without the volunteers in CERT, our level of readiness would be much reduced. So I want to acknowledge you for coming, but also to repeat what you said, which is for folks in the community that might be willing to give a little bit of time in order to protect your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues, the woman at the post office who always gives you the stamps that you want, and you want to protect her and her family too. Sign up for the CERT Academy and help protect and to serve your own community. So, Steve, thanks so much for being here. It's great seeing you. All right, that's it under item 1A. So we're going to proceed to item 1B, which is council communications and assignments. I first want, for the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing Authority, well, the agenda says I did it, but the city manager tells me I didn't, so I'm going to just repeat that Councilmember Sandin is assigned to the EFD Public Financing Authority to join myself and Councilmember Ledesma. All right, so other communications or reports under item 1B? Councilmember Sandin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District met on January 9th. We accepted the long-range planning calendar and the 2018 annual report. I was appointed to the board's Budget and Audit Committee. We received a briefing on air district permits and the permitting process, and we have two companies in West Sacramento that require a federal Title V permit. Those are Buckeye Terminals and Equilon Enterprises, which are both fuel terminals. The Air Quality Management District handles that permitting, though, on behalf of or in conjunction with the federal government. I also attended the Water Resources Association of Yolo County and the Yolo Subbasin Groundwater Agency meetings on January 14th, although Public Works Director Dinik Zambia represented the city at those meetings. As a departing chair, I wanted to say farewell to the boards as Councilmember Guerrero steps onto both boards. The Water Resources Association Board heard an update on the Lower Cache Creek feasibility study from the City of Woodland, and the Yolo Subbasin Groundwater Agency continued to work on and progress on developing the groundwater sustainability plan. And I have background for you, Councilmember Guerrero, that I'll share with you after the meeting. And along with Councilmember Guerrero, I attended the swearing-in ceremony of our newest Yolo County elected officials in Woodland on January 7th. There was a great showing from our fire and police departments as well.
Great, thank you very much. Councilmember Guerrero.
I just wanted to provide you with information that I've been appointed by President Jan Arbuckle from the League of Cities to the Transportation Committee and Public Works Policy, Transportation Communications and Public Works Policy Committee. And they have their first meeting this Friday. And I'm attending the League of Cities' new mayors and city council training that's going on this week. It's been pretty informative. And really appreciate getting the opportunity to be able to get additional training on how to be a very good city council member. Last week, I attended the Regional Water Authority meeting, and they elected new leaders for their board. The chair is Paul Schubert, and the vice chair is Carrie Schmitz. In addition, they have a new legislative and regulatory affairs manager, that's Ryan Ojakian, and I think that's going to be extremely important as looking at legislative proposals that are coming up this year is a water tax, and there are two legislative proposals and a budget proposal from the governor that we're going to pay attention to closely.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, I had a couple. The Food and Agriculture Innovation Council for the Greater Sacramento Economic Council met earlier this week. This is the subunit of GSEC, the region's economic development coalition, essentially, that focuses on the food and ag sector. It's dominated by Yolo County, and within Yolo County, largely by West Sacramento because of the significant presence of Bayer and other ag and food industry and research firms in the area. Also, a new agriculture-focused bank that's taken over that's acquired Community Business Bank over in the River Point Community Center, in the River Point Shopping Center is now, it's a new bank, and it's one of the focused principally in the ag sector as well. So we've been working with Bayer around their collaborator project that several of you are aware of. But this is an important council. Diane Richards from the Economic Development Department participates as well. But there's a lot of activity going on in this sector in terms of new jobs and industry locations that have great prospects for us in the city. So we're continuing to deepen some of those partnerships and exploit some of those prospects. The other one I want to report, which will be of no surprise, is although we didn't meet, the Riverfront Joint Powers Authority is the former streetcar policy committee. And as the council is aware, we opened the bids on Friday at 2 p.m. for the construction of the track system. We had opened the bids earlier in 2018 for the cars. Those bids came in under budget. The bids that we opened on Friday at 2 p.m. at Regional Transit for the actual streetcar construction of the lines came in at about $75 million over budget, quite significantly over budget. So both the council and the city of Sacramento, and then together, we have a lot of sort of reconnoitering to do around what our next steps are. Obviously, the need for the projects, meeting the project's objectives hasn't diminished. All of the building and development, all the permits, all the environmental documents, all the EIRs, everything else that has been approved for project after project after project after project, both in our riverfront and in Sacramento, the arena being obviously the the most obvious of those. All of those were conditioned on the streetcar, so we can't simply wipe the project away without creating a very significant transportation Armageddon in the urban core of the region. So we have a significant challenge ahead of us, both to look at alternatives both within the domain of streetcar-related alternatives, but also more broadly as well. So you won't be getting more reports about that from me. We will need to engage that here at the city first and foremost, and then once we have a sense of what our range of opportunities and options are, together with Sacramento. We don't have to make a decision in the next 18 hours. This is not an emergency situation. And FTA, if it were open, would not be surprised by this outcome because the bids in Seattle and Los Angeles and virtually everywhere else in the last 6 months have come in at about this range over the engineer's estimate. So it's not unusual, but FTA is not open anyway, so there's nobody calling us asking us what's next. So we have a bit of time to engage both ourselves and the community in what a full range of options are. And in some ways it may be an opportune moment because of the pretty rapid changes and opportunities that are happening in the transportation landscape. So it's disappointing in many ways, and a lot of folks on our staff team and folks in the community have been working on this for a decade, since the voters of West Sacramento overwhelmingly approved the ballot measure to support the streetcar project. And we have made a significant amount of progress on the project, but we're now at a fork in the road, and we're going to have to make some decisions. So look for those to come soon. All right, item 1C then is appointments to boards and commissions, and I have one. This is to complete the regular commission appointments, and that is for the Planning Commission. I'm appointing Teresita Sablan. Ms. Sablan has been a member of the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission for the last 2 years. She's the former Assistant Attorney General of the Northern Mariana Islands, which is the U.S. Trust Territory. But she's been a member of our commission. She lives in the State Streets neighborhood, along with many members of her family in different parts of the State Streets and West Oaks neighborhoods. And she's also an attorney with the state water boards, very familiar with environmental law, environmental regulations as they apply to land use as well. So I'm appointing her and asking for the council's approval of that appointment.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Who seconded? Martha? Okay.
Martha moved. Oh, no,
Second.
it's Martha second, okay, yes. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye again, please. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, that motion carries. All right, then with that, we're going to proceed to the consent agenda, which is items 2 through 11. Are there any items to remove or any items for separate question or comment?
10, please.
2 and 6?
Anyone else? 10. Is that what you wanted also?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so first we have item 2, which is consideration of annual report regarding development impact fees for fiscal year 2017, 2018. We do have one request for public comment.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, let's take that first, and then we'll proceed to council questions. And that's by, the request for public comment is for Pat Flint.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to everybody. I think I have the right item that I'm speaking on. If not, then just tell me to go back to my seat. The sewer impact fees are something that have really bothered me for a while since you talked about the corporate yard. $7,730,574.99 in other operating expenditures. I didn't see anything in the report that spelled those other operating expenditures out, unless I missed it. Again, I know you've used them or plan to use them for the corporate yard. You are definitely using them for developer incentives as shown in one of the items below. I thought they were supposed to be used for sewer only, although I find out you can write your own rules on this. I don't know if that's standard for all cities on how you use our impact fees that we all pay taxes on. Like I say, the corporate yard is in debt now for $1,819,451.08. You're in the red for the corporate yard. And can these credits be used, and if I'm not mistaken, but I'm getting old and my mind, isn't what it used to be, didn't we use some of the credits for water to give back to the residents? Didn't we all get a little credit on our water bill when we had excess credits or excess money to do that? Why are we giving it all to developers, especially in the Bridge District? Are we also offering them to the people, the developers in Southport? Those are just questions I have. And the flood in lieu fees are being used for storm drain improvements in the master plan. I thought they were being collected from us, the taxpayers, as flood revenue for levee repairs, levee work, that sort of thing. I don't remember drainage fees or in master plans or any of that sort of thing being included in those flood in lieu fees. I know it also was used for the Village Parkway, i.e. our emergency exit out of Southport. Although I was on the River Road today in the rain on my way to Elk Grove to take my grandson to an orthodontic appointment, and the River Road is very dangerous. Coming back on the River Road again, because it's my closest way to get to Elk Grove, the number of cars coming from West Sacramento at 4:30 this afternoon was, there were just car after car after car going south. There either has to be something done for that River Road, which isn't in our jurisdiction, I understand it's Yolo County, or we're going to have to do something. It's just a mess. So, again, thank you. Watch your in lieu fee spending.
All right, thanks. Paul, did you want to, there was a lot in there, but do you want to provide any background with respect to some of the questions that were raised?
Yeah. One of the topics addressed was actually what the impact fees are spent on. And while we take pains to note the work orders, the large CIP projects that get established, there are other expenditures of the funds that are not part of work orders. So when it says other expenditures, it's typically, it could be replacing some components, let's say with City Hall, if we're using City Hall impact fees. If we're replacing an air conditioner, we don't necessarily create a work order for that. And so we have these categories of other operating expenditures. In terms of developer reimbursements, which is a typical category of expenditure you'll see, what happens is when developers develop regional facilities that they oversize as part of...
The item that was being referred to is the item on the sewer credits, which is funded not out of the impact fees. It's funded by it's a regional sanitation program. So it's.
In the report we do talk about developer reimbursements as a use of impact fees.
The developer project in the Bridge District that was being referred to is the project that is
on the agenda.
That's the project that's on the agenda. Yeah. So but it's not funded out of this. It's not funded by the city, and it's not funded through the city's impact fees. It's funded by regional sanitation directly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Roscoe. Okay. All right.
Just another comment made that you'll see in the report is sometimes the funds have a negative balance, which was noted, and oftentimes that's because there is a loan between funds. And the loan needs to be repaid from that fee program. And for instance, the general fund will sometimes loan money towards a fee program, and then that eventually gets paid back from impact fees as they come in.
All right, thanks. Might also know that both impact fees and the in lieu fees are not taxes, and they're not paid directly by most of us. They're developer. Their developer fees as well. So okay. Thank you, Paul. Councilmember Guerrero.
Yes, thank you. Paul, I just wanted to ask you a few questions regarding the fire facility impact fees, which includes a nexus study entitled Analysis of Impacts and Development of Fire, Police, and Corporation Yard Facilities by Citygate Associates. And the date I noticed was June 1st, 2005. And I was interested in knowing whether we can update this particular study anytime soon. Is there a possibility of being able to do that?
So of the 11 fees that are outlined in the report, 2 were updated in 2017. 4 of them are currently being updated, and so that would be parks, traffic, flood in lieu, and corporation yard. So we still need to do about 5 more. So among that would be police and fire, to answer your question. That's on the agenda for this year. And then we would be updating city hall and child care impact fees as well.
Okay, good. And childcare was my next one that I was interested in knowing. Given that there is, a serious, state budget and legislative proposals that includes funding for facilities. And if the passage of that does come, we'll find out in June for the budget. Does that do we take into consideration that funding as we take a look at the impact facility fees to be able to draw down, in the future, leverage, using this funding to leverage, other funding if that's a requirement?
Most definitely. And most of our master plans, when they're adopted, assume that there would be other funding sources that would go towards the project. And so, for example, with our traffic impact fees, 5 of the projects that you see expenditures for fiscal year 17-18, they're leveraging grant funds. So that's definitely our intent, is to use those impact fees to leverage state and federal grant funds.
So when we take a look at either legislation or state budget proposals, and if they work through the school districts, for example, say they really focus on school. There's been some proposals to transition to the county office of ed, child care, to the county office of ed. And what if there's a mixture of a proposal that says that could we still use the child care facility impact fees for that?
Well, I'll give you an example of a joint project with the Washington Unified School District, where we entered into a lease with the school district for the recreation center, and we've been using park impact fees to help make the lease payments on that facility. So the answer is yes, we do joint projects with other entities.
Okay, good. And I'm only asking because just in case, as these proposals are being crafted, that we are able to maximize our resources in a legislative proposal that is going to help, bridge the ability to expand, because there's definitely a need to expand access to childcare.
Okay, on the next is item 6, which is consideration of assignment of regional sewer credits to Bridge District Riverfront LLC West Mixed-Use Project. Councilmember Guerrero.
Yes, I had some questions about this particular proposal. We have about 105 credits that I see left over, and looking at the history of the credits that have been used and how it's actually been able to attract businesses, restaurants, maximize our economic development projects here, and just a large sum of these credits are going over to this particular project, and we have 2 more years left to use the additional remaining credits of about 20. And seeing how there's, maybe 4 credits or 3 credits, offered for one project or another, I'm looking at reserving some. I'm thinking, is there a way to reserve some credits? Because we do have 2 years left, but I do understand that there are some challenges ahead that we could possibly lose these credits, and then, a developer has to pay more money, where we could have been able to help out to, help, in the construction of a project and be more supportive, because it's a multi-use setting. But we have empty lots such as Safeway and the old Safeway there, and other areas along West Capitol Avenue, or other projects that, could be used with these credits. And I'm just wanting to put the question out there on whether we can reduce the number of credits distributed here and reserve some credits for the additional 2 years.
I do want to point out and apologize to the council for the error in my report. You should have an errata sheet in front of you that corrects the amount of the savings to the developer. It is not $454,000, but in fact, it's $127,000 and change. So again, my apologies for that error. That would be assuming that the council would like to assign 80 credits, which is what our recommendation is. And part of the reason for that recommendation is that this project has a significant burden, has a number of benefits to the city in terms of its density, its readiness, and its community benefit to the project. It also benefits our obligation to building more housing under the Prop 1C obligation, so it reduces the amount of housing units that would have to be built by the city and/or other developers. So we do have 105 credits remaining that will sunset in December 2020. It's possible, it's the council's discretion, whether you would like to assign 80, 90, 100. I mean, you could really, if you would deem that it is a catalyst project, you can choose to assign a different number of credits. That is entirely within your discretion. There is no limit. We had a 40-unit limit at one time, but we do not have that any longer in the guidelines that the council approved in 2013. As to other projects in the city, this project would have potentially a retail and/or restaurant component. We do not have the estimate of what those fees would be until we know what that project is. The Safeway project would, depending on if it's a restaurant use or if it is deemed to be a catalyst use, whatever goes into that Safeway building, would be potentially eligible as owing to the fact that it's in the central business district. However, it would receive credits already for the sewer impact fees that have been paid for the prior uses at the Safeway building, so there'd be a savings there already. We don't currently have any other applications pending for sewer credits, so I think, it's prudent, and I think that's one of the reasons for our recommendation is to keep the 25 remaining so that we have the ability to assign to possibly other projects, other restaurants, other food serving uses that might come along in the next 2 years.
Okay, Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you. I guess my question to this, well, two of them, but on this, the note that Councilmember Guerrero brought up. The kind of why I'm aligned with this for two reasons is around the readiness, right? So this is based on when they put permits, right? That these credits are allowed. So it's ready to go, hopefully, which will bring my second question, but I'll get to that in a second. But the thing that I want to make sure of is that the credits that are used, the attractiveness to me about this project is it is bringing to the community, and one that needs it is facilities, buildings that could house a restaurant, that could house a coffee shop, that could house a dry cleaner, whatever. There are services needed now as we are putting, as people are coming to the Bridge District, to the Washington neighborhoods, at Capitol Yards, at a Gateway project, housing project. There's services needed there. And so I'm supportive of the credits going there, my question has to do with, well, if a restaurant comes into, because this will have a retail component, right? And we need facilities where restaurants can go. It's leasable, that they can do the tenant improvements too. Would the restaurant there would be no more credits available for that project, that property in general? So in other words, the 80 credits that are going towards the West project, a restaurant wouldn't be able to get 5 more credits for their project specifically.
Yes, they would. Yes,
they would be eligible?
Yes, they would be eligible as a food or restaurant use in the Bridge District. They would be eligible to get credits when that project is known. The West project itself is eligible because it is a catalyst project, if you agree that it is. So yes, so a restaurant, restaurants, food serving uses are also eligible for additional credits. And we did a similar situation with the barn and Drake's. The barn itself received credits for being a catalyst project, and Drake's also received credits because they put 2 restaurants in the barn.
Okay. Mike, so if, and any other facility that would be eligible to go towards, to get credits too, if there's, I'm not sure how many storefronts would be how many they're planning there, it escapes me.
They have about, I want to say 8,000 square feet of retail that is unidentified right now. However, the way the guidelines are written, only restaurants, food serving uses, or breweries in the brewing district with food serving uses are eligible for credits at all.
Okay. And then the other part has to do, I want to bring up, is around the readiness, and I know we put a timestamp on this one, April 31st. Is that being, I'm assuming that the developer is aware of this? And I just don't want to come back at the April whatever meeting and
So-
say we didn't give them enough time, or I'm just making sure.
Isn't it August?
We have put August 31st
Is it August?
in
I'm
here
sorry. I thought it
to
was
sort of
April.
keep the foot on the gas pedal, so to speak.
Okay.
However, I believe the recommendation is also to give them up to December of this
They have to
year.
use by December.
To use it, to pull down those credits. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was a change that was made in the report since I saw it, but we do want to keep the hammer on them because we don't want to assign the credits and have them sitting out there and not being used. And actually, in the guidelines, it says if they're not used within a year, the city manager has the authority to reassign them to another project. But in this case, because it's a catalyst, they would go back into the pool and be available for someone else if they were not used within a year of the time that they're assigned.
Right, and I'm sorry, that was my mistake. I wrote down April, it was August. But again, they've been informed of this because, I don't want to get to another time stamp and time date and they come back like these are going to go away. I know that's part of their incentive is to get on this and get to start moving dirt on this. So, okay, thank you.
I'm really struggling with this one, okay. Mayor Pro Tem Orozco?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two of my questions, I think, were answered. My concerns were, number one, that the impact, the credits could only be used in specific parts of our city, not any project throughout the city. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And those are limited to about 5 different areas, one of which is the area where the West project would be undertaken. The other thing is, you mentioned that there were no other projects in the queue that are currently vying for these credits. Is that correct?
I have no other applications pending, that's true.
Okay, but then if they sunset in December of 2020, what then? Do they just expire and they go away, or do we have the option of cashing in or getting any other kind of benefit?
They go away. They must be used. They cannot be cashed in. They have no cash value.
Okay.
And it would be our intention furthermore that we would not let that happen. We would come to you with proposals, or we would go to developers and actively seek to assign these credits. We would do everything possible to not let them sunset.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sandin?
Thanks. I think my concern is that we would have some at the end. So my question is, how long did this proposal, just to give us a sense of that, take to get to us here to actually be requesting the credits? Because it's like less than 2 years left to use the credits.
And we've had the credits
Right.
for a long time,
Right.
as you see, well, since 1994, when we closed our wastewater treatment plant, we were given this essentially unused treatment capacity. I may want to call on my director, Katie Jacobson, in terms of this project. I have not been managing this project. It has been in the works for a while. You may recall a large dirt pile that was
Right.
on the river for a long time, and so there's been a lot of back and forth, and right now, because of the economy, because of some of the uncertainty in the economic, world right now, projects are, they're skeptical, they're worried, there's a lot of uncertainty as to, what's the market doing, what's the housing market doing, so this has been in the works for a while, and, this project has notified us that they have a concern. The fees, as you see in here, are over $1.6 million. I think, and that's without the sewer impact fee. So we feel like this is appropriate because we need to encourage this project to go forward. It is ready, and it's ready to go. That being said, I'm not sure that if we assign the credits, it's actually going to get built this quickly. And again, Katie, do you
I
have
can chime in
anything
on
else
that. So if you recall, this property was originally contemplated for a hotel.
Right.
And the project at that time was identified as a sewer credit worthy project. So that's been several years now. To get to this point, it has been a lot of work, working with the developer over the last, really in earnest, over the last year and a half or so. But you're right, it doesn't bring any certainty that it'll happen, but we have contemplated using sewer credits on this property for some time.
Yeah, my concern is that if we don't offer these, and then at the end of 2020, we could have helped this project, and then we decided to hold back, and it didn't happen because of something like this. We don't have a lot of opportunities and incentives here. This is one. So to me, I think this is a proper use, knowing that there's nothing else in the queue, knowing this has taken a long time, and hopefully this will get the project going forward.
And I,
So I'm struggling with it. This was a catalyst project before, when it was first approved, when it was first entitled. A lot's been built nearby since that time. It's no longer a catalyst. This is the project that mound of dirt was there because the project was completely unresponsive to the city when it was in violation of code enforcement orders and didn't respond to the city manager or to code enforcement. This has been a bad actor project. Now it now has a new development team behind it. But it isn't a brand-new, interesting project that just came out of nowhere. And it has, of all the development projects that we have in the riverfront districts, it's one of the most highly incentivized already because of the Proposition 1B obligations, right? This is, I mean, one of the decision criteria here, for me at least, is $117,000 really the driver in this development project moving forward or not? Given the obligations under the state bond disbursements, the costs to the project and to us, versus if you don't build at all, versus the $117,000, this feels in some sense like it might simply be a gift to the project, not an actual. It's not big enough in terms of the overall fee package or anything else to cause you to pull the trigger. Right, if your underlying core financing is not available to move forward with the development project, this is not enough to move your decision needle one way or the other. So at least so that's one question for me, is whether or not that's the case. And it's not really a question for you, it's just a question in the world. Like, is this really a decision effector? Are we really going to change this development company's decision to build now or not? Or are we simply giving them the resources? And to some extent, that gets, for me, to the time frame. I think the time frame's too long. I'd like to see much more significant accountability, given the complete, utter lack of accountability that's been involved in this project up to this point. Again, recognizing there's a new development team, they get a fresh start to some extent, but fool me 3 times, and it's now on us. So I would like to see a more aggressive time frame for these, because the actual catalyst in the project, Fulcrum's built a whole bunch of these. They didn't get any sewer credits.
Actually, they did.
For their residential projects in the same way. I mean, if somebody else wants to build something else in any of these areas, whether they're fully residential or not just a restaurant, but any project, they ought to have the same level of consideration. But we're eating up a whole bunch of them here. So I'd like to. I mean, there's nothing that anybody on the council said that I don't agree with around it, but and maybe if we were to change the timeframe to make it earlier and make it hard, like there's no city manager extensions, none of that, then that would resolve it. But to me, I want to be sure if somebody comes forward with a project at Safeway and it's what Charlene's envisioned, it's not just one new restaurant comes in and therefore is able to use the old credits, but it's 6 stories and it's got it's full of it's a food center and it's 17 restaurants or whatever. There's no barriers to that happening that we couldn't have anticipated and dealt with. I'd rather end up having to send 50 sewer credits back than not have any when we need them for a real project that needs it in order to advance. So I'm not opposed conceptually. I feel, I'm not, it's clear, obviously, I feel burned by by the history of this project, but also I'm skeptical about the development economics. So I would like to see some slightly more, maybe not as aggressive as what Councilmember Ledesma accidentally said.
Right.
April might be a little too soon, but August and December to me is too far down the pike.
And with my earlier comments, I would agree with that, because otherwise we're losing our time horizon. I still want us to try to use them, but I think something closer would take care of that, in my opinion.
And do we have the option of expanding the use of credits? Because I understood that we have some guidelines and parameters where we start coming towards a deadline, and we look at the last year and expand the use. We'll be hitting a recession or some challenges in our economy, and maybe we can just attract, the lower hanging fruit at that point in time.
That's completely within the council's discretion to modify the guidelines. And I do want to point out that the report and our recommendation is that the building permit must be issued on or before August 31st, and that the credits don't actually go to this company, to this development, until the permit is issued, because they have to pay those fees when when they come in to pick up the permit. So if they don't pull the permit by August 31st, then we could say that you're done. These 80 credits are now back in the pool. I would like to ask, again, I don't know what the timing is, and I'm sorry I don't know that. I think it's already been through design review, it's already been through some entitlement process, but I don't know if it's in the plan check process or not. Katie, I don't know if you have a background on that.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. As far as I know, the plans have not been submitted, and I spoke with California Ventures by email today to ask them the status, and they indicate that they are still struggling with some cost factors, but they are pushing ahead as fast as possible. They're also waiting for our analysis in terms of any the private-public interface amenities that the city's considering installing at the same time concurrently with the project, so they're waiting on that data back from us. But they indicate they're still 100% committed and pushing forward, but they haven't crossed the finish line in terms of their costs.
So can I guess, because we've issued them permits, with the grading permit, that wouldn't have counted, right?
Well, it
If you
depends on...
came in, under the prior development regime, you came in, you got a grading permit for your building, and you started grading, at that point, you're not paying your fees, right? So you don't...
It depends on how if they're just pulling grading, then I don't believe they have to pull all the other, they don't have to pay all the fees.
Okay.
It's when they actually pull the building permit for the building itself that the credits are assigned. Otherwise, they pay the full price.
Okay. All right, other comments?
So the question is, do we want to change the dates at this point in time? Do we make those recommendations that move up the dates from August maybe to June?
Well, in terms of pulling a building permit, I think that would be, if they're not in plan check now, I suppose, it could take 3 months, three to 4 months when they submit complete plans for them to actually get the permits, depending on how many times the permit comments go back and forth. So,
Right, I think...
maybe August is too long, but...
My recommendation would be the council is interested in pursuing or proceeding with the gist of the staff recommendation. We eliminate the back-end date, giving them more time at my discretion, and go with the hard date of August 31st for pulling a building permit. So at least there's no chance of an extension.
So keeping the hard date, not the extension, and then maybe consider expanding the use of future credits so that we can not lose credits in the future.
That's within your discretion, absolutely, to change the guidelines at any time. And if they don't pull the permit by August 31st, then those credits are still there to be assigned to someone else.
in the, if they don't pull the permit by, in May, what's the legal nature of the action we're taking tonight? Are we irrevocably assigning the credits, or in May, could we determine, look, we have a better project somewhere else right now, and we're now going to move these credits over there instead? We gave you till August. It's not August yet, but if you really wanted these credits, you should have gone earlier. I mean, is this a legally binding allocation of credits?
It's not, I don't think it's a legally binding assignment of credits. I just think that the developer would, if you approve it, then they need to be able to count on it in their financing, in their financial stack.
Right, like when you apply for a grading permit, in order to build a project, we kind of need to count on you building the project.
Right,
I get that if we approve it that, but we also can be very clear that that's what we're doing. We could say, you have till August, and we reserve the right at our
Absolutely.
discretion to
Absolutely.
reassign the credits.
Right.
You could, and I would recommend that you do that if that's what you want. I would make it clear that you are reserving that discretion.
I mean, if the worst-case scenario is if they haven't submitted their plans by May, and poor Katie comes back to us for an update, and they're still lukewarm, that's every indication that they're not going to make it by August. There's just no way. And I think that's the issue. I understand clearly the mayor's frustration with this project, because it's been frustrating all of us, and we welcomed in with with clean slate, but we welcomed in new energy into this project, and it has gotten new energy since these folks have come in, but it seems that this project has, on the updates I've had, it's been a little bit of a back and forth tug, not even a back and forth, it's just a one-way ask for time and clarity around the things we've been asking for as a community, be it riverfront amenities, activating the riverfront, retail. And I'm supportive of this in nature, because I know that in the riverfront, Washington neighborhoods they're in need of more services and more space. And that reason alone is I can feel comfortable granting credits. Someone basically building a building, someone can come lease. I would hope that's the outcome that I'd like. Is it, I could debate with the mayor about, is it a catalyst or not? I mean, but the matter of fact is that there's a facility going there that isn't available today. But it's got to get built, and that's just the part that I'm supportive of putting the leash on it as you have suggested. And I just wanted to be clear of that's our intent. I don't want to waver from it at all. I want to send a signal that we want their project. We just want it. They told us November, and it's January. So I think we're sending a clear message. I'm supportive of this project. They built it. We can make the riverfront work. All the things, restaurant goes in, has the ability to bring more services to the neighborhood, to an already burgeoning riverfront in Washington neighborhood. Yeah, we're all in. I think we're saying that, but no more of this sort of delay and vacillation over it. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And my final clue is they're not here. I mean, if a multi-million-dollar project was going to go forward, yes or no, based on an incentive like this, you would be here. I mean, we've got developers that are here that show up for purely ministerial accepting of the trees that on the sidewalk that are worth $80 or whatever. I mean, they don't let those things go. If this was really the leverage point for the project, they would be present, and they're not here. So it sounds, maybe I can try to summarize that we would, based on what the city manager said, we'd be at the August date, but that would be the end of the December date, and his authority for extensions would be removed, that we would explicitly reserve the right to withdraw or to revoke the credits prior to that date, and that we would direct staff to return with a end of the season, end of the period, broadening of the criteria.
Yes.
So, at a future council meeting. Okay. All right, so we're still on consent, so we're not going to take a vote on this yet. And we'll proceed next to item 10, which is consideration of operation agreement with electric scooter operator Jump. Councilmember Sandin.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the report. I had a number of issues and questions that were answered in the staff report, particularly the micromobility ordinance is coming to us after this, the indemnity of liability, ability to cease operation if it doesn't work, and the scooters are moved and collected every 24 hours. So my big question for you is when, if this goes forward tonight, when will we see the first scooter here?
So we are working right now, and so is Jump in concert with the city of Sacramento. They're going through their process to adjust their permit to. In loose conversations, we talked about February, but we don't have a hard date yet. But that is reliant on the final agreement of this contract and also deciding what functional way we're going to park these around our existing hubs that we've identified here already. Okay. So those are, we think, are achievable when they want to move forward, if they can adjust their permit with our partners across the river in that time frame as well.
Okay, so the micromobility ordinance might be already to us as well, possibly.
There's a fair chance that we could be in a workshop mode
Okay.
for the mobility ordinance, and then we would have to then adopt a new ordinance through that, and then there's a 30-day adoption after
Right.
that. So this would still be a bit of a gap measure, and that is its intent, which we're also mirroring Sacramento's micromobility or shared rideables. They have a different terminology than we do. Ordinance process as well. We're doing it in concert so that when operators come in, because of our fluid boundaries across the river, that operators will come to both cities at the same time.
Okay.
So just to follow up on that, so under, is it this agreement or just the staff approach that they couldn't, I'm not saying anybody would want to, but that they couldn't operate here unless the city of Sacramento also permitted them?
There is nothing in our agreement that would stop them from going across the river. It's their adjustment of the permit for the city, with City of Sacramento to bring scooters in. And historically, we have also worked with other scooter providers and gotten very close to an agreement, which they've chosen not to pursue because of the lack of the ability to go across the river as well.
But I guess my question is, if Jump said, hey, guess what, we're ready to go, March 1st or February 1st, but Sacramento, because of their fee structure and everything else, they're not ready, but we're going to go to West Sac anyway. Is this agreement permit that?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Do you have a question?
I'd like to.
Mayor Pro Tem Orozco?
Thank you. Chris, I'm really excited about the prospect of bringing another alternative transportation program to West Sacramento, and I appreciate the success of the other ones that we've brought in, whether it be the initial bike share program or Jump Bikes, which I believe has had a great deal of popularity, and I mean, I see people all over the city utilizing that option, and there's nothing more exciting than to see a big group of people arrive at lunchtime at the barn in a horde of red bikes and not having to look for parking and clearing the air and having all the other benefits associated with being out on the roads in a different way for short car rides. I just wanted to inquire as to, number one, why isn't this proposed as a pilot as opposed to just indefinite?
It is envisioned this will be a short-term pilot as they would come in when we finish our micromobility ordinance and just obtain a permit like any other provider would. This just allows them to come in and operate here in advance of that permit structure that we are developing right now.
Okay. My only concerns, I'm really excited about this, but can you help me understand how we can ensure that people are not, do they have to take pictures of the bike after they park it somewhere so that we have some kind of finger on the pulse of who's utilizing these bikes and bad users can be dissuaded from re-engaging in bad
Sure.
behavior?
Sure. Much like, excuse me, Jump does now, where if they see a bike if it is reported as being inappropriately parked or they've noticed it, they will then notify the last user to say, please park appropriately, here are the guidelines for that, which I've seen on several occasions, and has been a very effective way to adjust jump bike users for parking correctly. They'll use the same methodology, I'm assuming, for scooters, because it is all through the same application and the same login. So they have the full functionality to notify the last user if something is done inappropriately.
Is there a penalty?
We are exploring that, much like our partners across the river are looking at imposing a $15 citation to the mobility operator, not the user, which the assumption is then they would pass through to the user. But since we don't have a direct connection to the user, it's cleaner to go directly to the operator. We are exploring those options. We don't know yet, because this has not been done in this region, if that is an existing problem. It has been historically through other cities, but they've also evolved to where they've signalized and better educated the users on where to park the devices. And there's been a little more upfront education through the application onboarding and other methods to instruct what is a more appropriate place to park. Keep in mind, scooters have been in the transportation realm for just over a year now. They're a very, very new mobility element. There's a lot of work kind of coming in that cities have done, some best practices to identify how to park and how to better educate users. We are now looking to incorporate as much of those as we can into this system and the mobility framework as we move forward, so that we don't run into the problems that other cities have run into over the past year.
Yeah, we're navigating, widening bike lanes and making sure that our streets are bike-friendly. And I'm, anticipating that, our neighbor's fear would be that if we don't have a safe route, people might be utilizing sidewalks where pedestrians might be walking, and that might be a danger or hazard, more so than a benefit. I'm also concerned about it being because a scooter, I have 5 of them on the side of my house right now for 4 kids, and they are an attractive nuisance because they look and appear to be more special than just the average bike you would see. It's fun. And while that's an asset, I also consider the fact that it might be a liability if people are attracted to use it inappropriately. As just thinking aloud, I wonder if JUMP is considering any type of proactive measures to encourage helmet use, or, you'd mentioned already parking, which that's great. But I know they have to be in our city, according to this, 16 years of old and have a driver's license and or a permit, whereas in other jurisdictions, they have to be 18 and have a driver's license. And my first concern is just the safety of the users and the non-users, and I'm wondering if there's a way that we envision, just looking at the costs and benefits of being a little bit more conservative.
Sure. We're currently following all the state guidelines, which are they need to be a licensed driver to operate a scooter. They are prohibited for use on the sidewalk, and we're working with our enforcement staff. If that is an issue, we'll definitely be addressing it at the time with the operator, or I'm sorry, with the user. And all the other guidelines around that generally are aimed around safety are the state level base standards. As for helmet use, that requirement at the state level was removed as of January 1, 2019. And what I've experienced from other cities is that's not very widely used as a helmet with the scooters, unless you are on a privately owned one. Because I think of just the ease of use, people don't generally carry a helmet around with them. I have not addressed JUMP directly about offering helmets or discounts or things of that nature, and I can definitely reach out and do that through this process. And it is also important to note there's not a lot of safety data that has been compiled on the scooters yet since the newness of this device, and I know that work is being done now, whether they're not sure. Public health information and data just comes in slower than I think transportation data does. So we're awaiting some of the academic research on that now to see really how these are affecting people.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay, Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris, for bringing this forward, and I understand now what, I was a little, some of my question was around how we're coordinating this with, before we have the ordinances in place, so thank you, it's been clear. I guess, yeah, I'm supportive of it, and been asked directly, when are scooters coming, right? And I think the onset of the jump bikes and success and the demand we had for it to bring them to the Southport area. It was a huge development, and we just implemented that less than a year ago, right, May. And the success of those, Councilmember Roscoe is exactly right. It's just been kind of an overwhelming, such a natural thing to hit Sacramento and the West Sacramento area. It's just a natural place for that kind of activity. So this has been, this is really going to, for me, is exciting to kind of add to the mix. And but part of that is it's in the context of what we're trying to do and the mobility. And so while I am interested in, though, I think Jump is going to make available to us the data around its usage, and it would be something to kind of see how other cities. I've been to San Diego and a few other cities that they're pretty prevalent. And I know in San Diego was sort of a bit of the model on our own mobility action plan around how they approached it. So I am interested, as this is feedback, around how we're going to measure its success and how we use the data to understand how it fits into the context of West Sacramento with jump bikes, with VIA, with our own YOLO bus service, and how is this all working to better enhance the mobility of folks. I am interested to understand, and I think the question was answered around bikes that go outside the service area, because it was not uncommon before the boundaries changed to see a red bike occasionally at the Southport Town Center or parked in a neighborhood. And my guess is you're going to see a few probably down in the Southport area coming home from the barn or coming home from just going for a ride. And so I will be interested to understand kind of at a certain point, when is that inflection point where we start to consider that there will be users who will, that will want to use it to get to and from the riverfront, or once the springtime hits and the sunshine comes out, it's just another way to get to and from. And I just want to have that some anticipation of when we might be ready to think about that, because nobody thought about it really about jump bikes. We just said we'll keep it limited to this area because the riverfront needs them. But lo and behold, you see there was a jump bike parked down the street from my own home that somebody used and kept it, and they used it. And so we just got to be ready to adapt. And what's the process to adapt beyond that service zone we anticipate?
So we're really interested in all those data points as well and how they'll all fit together. I'm personally really interested in seeing where we're getting the ridership for scooters. Where are they coming from? Are they coming from cars? Are they coming from bikes? Are they coming from pedestrians? We're not sure, even industry-wide, where that's coming from yet. So as we move through several kind of planning processes that we're doing this year, the Mobility Action Plan in general will give us a lot of tools to really start looking at that as we get data in from Jump and other providers when they come in. This agreement and this trial period of doing this will start to really show us where they are moving around to the city. We're going to be redistributing them back to the 8 hub locations that are in the entertainment zone now, but we are allowing them to go throughout a good chunk of the city now, because we just don't know how people are going to move on these yet.
Right.
So we'll take that data when they come in for a permit, then it's a good logical chance to start talking about areas and new hub locations in that format right there. And Jump has been a really good partner when it comes to expanding when the data supports it, because they want the ridership as much as we do to do that. So we work very closely with them, and they are housed in town for redistribution purposes. So we can definitely make those adjustments fairly quickly when the data supports it.
Are the scooters, from my recollection from the Line Bike, they are not, are they allowed on the trail system on the Clarksburg Branch Trail? Are they allowed there?
We currently have no prohibition on a Class 1 bike trail, and I don't think one exists at the state level either. To me, the device functions within the same parameters as a bike and kind of has the same general speed, and so I don't see why we would prohibit those. It's a nice logical connection for a lot of people, a nice throughput connection as we open up new trail systems, like the Sycamore Trail coming too. It'd be a really logical way to get around through the city.
But that's not in the current service areas.
Yeah, it is.
Would it be in the map?
The Sycamore Trail is.
Okay.
Basically, the current service area that we're discussing
So the whole
goes
jump
down to the
bike area.
Deepwater Channel, but
Maybe I'm just misreading it. Okay.
Yeah, it's not the dots, it's the red boundary.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Yes, thank you. I have just a couple of questions here. I just want to say I appreciate my fellow council members' comments as well about safety. That's been in the back of my mind as well for the user and the non-users. But taking into consideration the price and maximizing our opportunities for those that probably can't afford it, is there a way to do some research so that maybe local colleges can contribute, subsidize, so that we can start reaching the younger generation to use other forms of public transportation? Sometimes the buses are not, as accommodating, but just start expanding use so that it may be inexpensive for them at this point in time, but if we can find a way to subsidize it and either maybe some public benefit programs to consider use of that as well.
those are definitely in the realm of things we are looking at. And currently with Jump, they offer their Boost program, which is aimed at equity areas that offer a lower cost membership for use with the Jump bikes. We haven't discussed specifically applying that to scooters, but we definitely can through that process or what their plan is. As we move through the larger micromobility framework, the equity component of that and how we address that per the type of mode is a really important piece of it. So we're looking to definitely meet our underserved areas of the city and those who generally might really be reliant on these as a truly functional mobility device to have those options afforded to them as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we did have one request for public comment on this item, so Mr. Doherty, thank you. And that's by Danny Langford.
Good evening, everyone. So I had the opportunity to visit my son, who's currently stationed in San Antonio after not seeing him for 3 years because he was in Italy. And they have jump bikes. They also have the scooters. They have the Lime or Bird, and it's extremely dangerous. There was an article yesterday or today, and I meant to print it out for you guys, but my printer wasn't working. In roughly the 3.5 months that they've had them, there's been over 78 calls that firefighters and first responders have had to address and go to. They end up all over the sidewalks. And I'm not saying this from an article, I witnessed it. We went down to the Riverwalk, they're all over everything. They cut them off at 9:30, there's no docking stations. People come, and some people even fight over taking them to recharge them in their own homes, and they're paid like $5 a scooter. They litter up the sidewalks so much that we actually had to move 2 scooters out of the way on our way to dinner to let a wheelchair go by us. It's very concerning to me. As the mother of a child that had a brain injury at 5 and almost died in this community, granted, he wasn't on a scooter, but he was only about this high off the ground without helmets, and I realize the state has changed that law. I think it's extremely dangerous, and if you think that 16 and under aren't going to ride them, they are. They do in San Antonio. I saw it firsthand. I wished we could wait on this until after we get the data on how the jump bikes are working. Bikes and scooters are so different when riding. Granted, I can't ride either one anymore because of health conditions, but bikes are so much more stable. And I can't imagine how dangerous this is going to cause on our trails. They go fast. I think they're a little more reckless than bikes, to be honest. I just would hate to see anybody go through what we went through in almost losing our child to a head injury, because concrete is like that. Are there docking stations, or are they going to be randomly picked up by residents throughout the community? We've seen that jump bikes are getting destroyed on the other side of the river. Scooters are so much easier to obtain to do that. With our police and fire already being stretched thin, I would hate for them to have to focus on all the injuries or ill behavior or who's riding underage for scooters. I hope that you guys will back off on this, at least until we get some more data on it. It's very concerning to me. And I just hope that you'll listen to that, because our resident safety is first and foremost. And yeah, they sound like they're great and fun, but my son and his friends all go out on them to go out to the clubs or whatever, but they're shut off at 9:30, so they Uber at home. But they've had so many accidents of people just flying off of them because they're unstable. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Langford. All right, so the world of transportation is changing extremely fast, and we're not changing anywhere near as fast, and our regulatory strategies aren't changing fast. Jump bikes is a great example in some ways, although, I mean, that was 8 years in the making. But now we describe, even tonight, I've heard it, we describe it as natural, and we hail our good judgment in how in the the phasing of it and all of that. But there was a lot of objections to the notion of bike share and the clutter from any sort of dockless bike share system by a lot of the folks here. Some of us, maybe me, a lot of folks who were concerned about dockless bikes. If not every bike was going to go to a dock, it was going to be the worst thing in the world. There would be clutter all over the place, and it would be an utter disaster. It would be unsafe. You'd have people who had never ridden a bike would now be on a bike. It'd be highly dangerous. And at the same time, nobody would use it all at once. And then it happened, and now we all agree it was one of the best transportation innovations that was ever been created here in this region. And I just think it's a good lesson, not just around bike share itself, but around the way that we think about the role of government in telling people what to do. And in allowing people to create their own solutions and to learn from what people do, and not try to what if everything in advance, because we would never do anything. Like, we certainly would never approve cars today if we had the kind of analysis that we apply to everything else. There's no way we would give people a 1,000-ton weapon and say, go ride it down the street. We'd never do that. And in fact, that's it's still the most dangerous transportation system that we have is cars. So the more that we provide real, viable alternatives to the automobile, we dramatically improve safety, we improve public health, and of course we're going to meet all the climate change and other goals that are also very critical to the survival of the planet and to our own city. So we're under an imperative to create these, but also it isn't just that. We want West Sacramentans who go off to the Army or to college to come home here, who get an internship in San Antonio or San Diego or Seattle, to come home. We are not that kind of an island where we can simply, where if we say, no, this is a place where your regular way of getting around in St. Louis and Miami and Oakland and wherever else, that everyone else in the world is now doing or moving towards, we're not doing that here. Now, we can, but we ought to have a very strong reason and not simply a set of what ifs about what makes us so different. That despite all the evidence of what's going on in these other cities and the expectations of our current residents, our future residents, our residents who are off in the military or at college right now and want to come home, we have to meet their needs. So to me, this is essential. It's the reason the council approved the Lime scooters a year ago as well. I mean, this council's been very progressive in this domain, but there are very few cities in the country that aren't already either doing this now or moving rapidly towards it. And they are learning, and we're learning from them. So San Diego is a great example, as Councilmember Ledesma said. A year and a half ago, San Diego was a mess. When the scooters first came out, they were everywhere. They were blocking sidewalks all over the place. They were brand new to everyone. Traffic folks didn't know what to do. Riders didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do, so it was chaos. You go to San Diego today, and what you see is a lot more scooters than back then, but you see ordered an ordered system where, as riders see, oh, there's 5 jump scooters lined up next to each other in this, basically this rectangle and, just off the sidewalk, that must be where the scooter is supposed to go when I'm done. They figure it out. They do, in San Diego at least, you do take a picture of your scooter as you park it, which is a slight nudge to say, you better, somebody's paying attention. Right? These small things make a difference, and they have created in most of these other cities. I can't speak to San Antonio, but I can't speak to 11 or 12 other cities around the country where this is working well, where a combination of small public policies, some enforcement, some work by the companies, and just the natural evolution of us as human beings has resulted in a much more orderly environment. And the more people who are riding scooters and bikes, the safer it is for them. Right, that's the bottom line. The more people who are out of cars and using the public right-of-way in other ways, the more we all pay attention to each other. The more we don't assume that the next person over is in a Jeep Cherokee and it doesn't matter if I happen to nudge them. No, I've got to pay attention because that could be my English teacher. That could be my daughter that's in the lane next to me. Only when there's a critical mass of people on bikes and scooters and other forms of transportation. So this is important for safety. It's important for public health, and it's obviously important for the environment as well. And we know this company. We know it well. And they're headquartered here. This is an important first step. So I'm definitely supportive of this. I think one of the reasons I like the staging of this with the ordinance is that just like with bikes, I mean, when we took this up a year ago with Lime, we're like, okay, we only want to do this in the let's start in the entertainment zone. And we're kind of doing that here too, but I really like your notion of using the whole service area so we're letting the data show us things. But as we saw with jump bikes, I mean, it's pretty predictable that we're going to do this, and for the first 3 or 4 weeks, people in the city are going to, there are going to be a lot of folks on all sides of the issue saying, oh my God, this is horrible, who let these scooters in? And then the other half of the people will be saying, oh, finally. And then about 2 weeks after that, all of our calls and emails will be, why are there no scooters in Southport? Why are there no scooters in Bright? Why do you hate my neighborhood so much? Right? We know that's going to happen. That's eminently predictable, given just based just on our jump bike experience. So this process, this 2-stage process with the ordinance, I think will give us a rapid chance as we do the mobility ordinance to be ready to go citywide, close to citywide, or at least to the full jump service area rapidly, because I think it's very likely that that's going to be the outcome that we're going to have to deal with, and we should be prepared for it. Whereas with jump bikes, we had to tell people, we don't know, it could be a year or 2 or 3 until you get bikes in your neighborhood. Now we were able to do it faster than that, but I think we should be able to be responsive. So I like the conservative approach at the beginning that you've outlined here in terms of the geography, consistent with what the council said last year, and I think it was Councilmember Orozco that suggested it, or Mayor Pro Tem Orozco that suggested. I think that makes a lot of sense. At the same time, I think it's valuable to be ready, at the staff level, to be ready to come forward to us with what's the plan once demand gets to the point where we need to serve a larger portion of the city. Mayor Pro Tem Orozco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chris, I'm wondering, I mean, the cities that have been mentioned, San Antonio and San Diego, and I know Fort Lauderdale also has a program. Those seem like very large service areas, and we are not those service areas. I mean, we have a smaller city with, 55,000 residents, not all of whom are going to be using these scooters, but still, the smaller city and the smaller area, I wonder if that will translate into a more an insulated environment where the policing and the follow-through and enforcement is a little bit more concentrated. That's my hope. And if Jump wants to do business in our city with these scooters, then they should be very responsive and make an effort to, number one, get those bikes off of sidewalks if they're left there. Number two, reporting any problems so that we have that information and we can make an educated decision as to whether or not we want to retract or rescind or make some other type of limiting decision-making down the line, or just change course somehow. But I think it really does boil down to, our community reporting any issues, and then just the company being very responsive in enforcement. That's what's going to be, and then me getting that information down the line so that I can, that this is a great program that's working, and, we can correct whatever problems we have.
I can definitely relay that I'm the primary contact for jump comments from the residents, and I get them often enough, especially when we first started the program. Jump has been nothing but very responsive to rectify an issue. If there is an issue, if something's parked, they'll go out immediately and just rectify it. I've had it within half an hour of sending an email. So it's been very responsive. So I'm confident in our partner in this and our provider. And yes, we are a smaller jurisdiction, but we do have the adjacency of a much larger region, so we're looked at together. So that's their attractor to come here, is to operate in West Sacramento, is the fluidity back and forth across the river. So we're kind of partnering in those normalization and learning of this together, which I think is going to benefit both cities.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Yes, I wanted to reflect on Ms. Langford's comments and also just express that I do have concerns about the safety of folks that use it. In Sacramento, they've already approved it, correct?
They have not yet.
Oh, they have not yet.
What
Okay.
they've done in Sacramento is they did a bike share ordinance, and at the last minute, they included scooters into that.
I see.
The functional reason was so scooter companies could not come in without providing parking racks. And at that time, scooter companies had not in their business plan to put in ground parking. Jump is in a unique position where they have jump racks on the ground in Sacramento. They could pull back a few bikes and put in some scooters and comply with their permit, which is why they're trying to advance in Sacramento and here right now.
Okay. So if they move forward, would those scooters be able to come to West Sacramento as well?
Yes.
Okay, without us moving forward? If they move forward and we didn't?
Technically, yes, we have not been as enforcement heavy when it comes to the threat of impounding them going across the river, like we have had conversations with Sacramento. But
Okay. So if that's the case, we wouldn't be able to provide the barrier from Sacramento to West Sacramento. Well, in looking at the fact that you're going to provide a rigorous study, and it looks like you're going to, I'm also concerned about the costs that could impact either law enforcement or firefighters, should there be a safety concern, somebody gets injured. Could we include considering recovering costs from, it says law enforcement, but from our firefighters, providing a response if there's a medical, emergency as a result of a scooter?
so we have built into the agreement a $10,000 security bond to address any unforeseen issues that we've seen as a city through this agreement.
So, okay.
The difference between this and the micromobility framework coming forward is that we'll have a fee associated with it that will address those concerns, but this has a security deposit that we can draw from if we are in a situation where the city is out some dollars to address something.
So it says here only law enforcement, but it does include firefighters as well, as all of our first responders.
It is up to the city manager's discretion to use that account.
Okay, their discretion.
Yes.
Okay, good to know. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right, anything else on the consent agenda? All right, then is there a motion?
I think with the, I'm not sure how I think we left it with keeping item 6.
Yes.
They were keeping the time frame as proposed, or
No,
was there an amendment?
Yes, August.
August.
No extension, no December date.
Okay.
With the explicit right to revoke, or whatever the right term is.
I just want to make sure, but that's the amendment.
And the direction to staff to return to the council at a future date with options for expanded scope of the program for the final year or 18 months.
All right, so I'll make the motion to consent agenda with those amendments, as well as on item 6, as well as the change in the sewer credits fee, fee schedule, which was presented to us. I'll move the recommended action.
A second.
All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. That brings us to item 12, which is a public hearing and consideration of first reading of ordinance 19-1, repealing and reenacting Title 17 of the Municipal Code for the Zoning Ordinance Modernization Project, ZOMP, with an exclamation point. Welcome,
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I do have a slideshow, so I'll wait for it on the screen. If it's not working. You can see it, right?
Just a few more seconds. The projectors.
So the zoning ordinance before you tonight was brought before council in a workshop format last month on December 19th. And for those watching at home or those in the audience who are unable to attend the workshop, I'll briefly go over an overview of what zoning is. So next slide.
Very briefly, right?
Very brief, yeah. So zoning is a set of regulations that divide the city into zones and prescribe or restrict what can or cannot be done and or built on the property based on that zone. It can include topics like parking, setbacks, land use, animal regulations, fencing, really what the built environment looks like. Next slide. So at the workshop, there were a few main comments. The first one was, how is the ZOMP incorporating emerging technology like algorithmic zoning, the blockchain? So as part of this work, we did have a sub-consultant on Code Plus, and they are working on an online interactive component, be fully interactive, mobile friendly, and it'll include a few calculators like parking and FAR calculator, potentially a signage calculator, and it could include other calculators as well. So that makes it easier for applicants or property owners to know what their requirements are. They can easily put the information in and it spits out what's required. In terms of algorithmic zoning and blockchain, those are definitely in the infancy, and we will be looking at those and how we can implement that technology into further zoning code updates. We have, since the RFP went out for the ZOMP project in the summer of 2017, we have been approached by a few startup companies that are in that space that are working on algorithmic zoning code, and they provided a demo to us, and that was really interesting work, and we're going to keep tabs on that for any future update. And so there was a request for some clarification on how the parking standards have changed from the current code. So for the most part, they have been reduced. There are a lot more reductions in the ZOMP available for projects. For residential projects, currently there are 3 different parking zones in the city. There is the suburban, the infill, and the urban. And the urban is the lowest parking requirement. The ZOMP parking standards is citywide, and it is primarily very aligned with the current urban standard, to give you an idea of how far it's been reduced citywide. And then the current urban district, that area, the Central Business District, Washington District, the Bridge District, there is a 50% reduction on top of that. And then another comment at the December meeting was in regards to car share. And if a developer requested a reduction in the amount of parking that's required because they're going to incorporate some sort of car share, if they can't find a car share provider to utilize those spaces that are dedicated for car share, what would occur? So the director could allow those spaces to be provided, they could be used by the general public, and it's been further refined so that those spaces need to be available to everybody. They can't be leased. That way, there's more of an incentive for them to continue looking for a car share provider. And if they do find somebody, if they do find a car share provider, it's easier to move them in. They wouldn't have to take somebody off a lease. So moving on to additional changes. These are largely carried over sections of the current code that were inadvertently not included. The floor area ratio exception for hotels with planning commission approval, that's in the current code, and that allows for a hotel that has a lot of amenities and more meeting space. If they're bumping up against our maximum floor area ratio, this allows them to exceed that, and we want to have hotels that have more amenities and more meeting space, and this allows for that. So this is carrying over the current practice. And then the liquor sales, this was inadvertently not included. The current code requires a conditional use permit for liquor sales. This carries over the current practice and also further refines that. It allows larger, like grocery stores or Walmart or Target, allows them to only need a minor use permit or in some instances be permitted by right. And then any smaller grocery store, convenience store, or accessory liquor sales under 10,000 square feet would require a conditional use permit. So this was carried over from the current code, and then further refined. So this concludes staff presentation. I'll now turn it back over to City Council for questions and to open up the public hearing. Thank you.
Are there questions at this time before we open up the public hearing? All right, thank you, Mr. Laffey. All right, then we have a few requests to speak under this item. The first is by Rosie Ramsey.
Hi, I just wanted to say I really appreciate y'all working on this about the boats and RVs and the trailers, and the animals and everything and the fencing. I think you've done a good job of trying to work on it. I read the blog that was written on December 31st and noticed that it had one line in there that I still didn't find favorable. So that line has changed somewhat, and I'm kind of wondering why. Let me read it. It's, let's see. This issue is talking about the RV, trailer, and boat parking. And it says, this issue won't be taken up again in a future zoning code review unless directed by the Planning Commission or City Council, and after further research into the significance of the August 23rd, 1984 date. And my question is a couple of things. Of the 320 some odd pages of ZOMP, that's the only contingency I see out of all those ordinances that they came up with. That's the only contingency. Oh, we might bring this up again. And I'm sorry, but I just, for one, I'm just bespoke when you talk about bringing up something again. When the workshops were done for the trailers and RVs and the boats, it was done in a manner that was superficial and somewhat ludicrous. I could say a joke, because they weren't even, people that lived within the city were not even included in the workshop. Suzanne Johnson actually researched this and found out who was included in the workshop. So I'm saying I'd either like this line struck, because obviously the Planning Commission and the City Council can do whatever they wish at any time. They don't need this line in there saying that out of all those ordinances. Or I'd like a line included saying that we promise that we'll have like 3 workshops on this if we do it. So that's kind of what I wanted to say.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
And Danny Langford?
I agree with what Rosie had to say. I haven't been able to attend every single planning commission, but as many of you know, I go to as many meetings as possible. And I wasn't here at the last meeting, council meeting, because I was out of town for Christmas. But I do have some concerns, and maybe this has been addressed. I've been trying to read through the 300-page documents. At both planning commissions that we had, standing room only, by the way, in here, numerous people speaking, so many people upset about things in this document. A 10-minute presentation by staff just doesn't hit it. You don't learn anything. At those meetings tonight, I timed it 10 minutes. And I'm not trying to bang on staff because I know they've worked hard on this. But I think for the public to see transparency and everything, we need more than 10 minutes. Limiting parking in front of people's homes is just going to cause dissension with the residents. You shouldn't have to have a parking pass in front of your own home to have a party or family gathering. It makes no sense to me. I think it's very sad that we're doing that. I met a lot of residents throughout the election time, especially over in the Bridge District, in the apartments, and they are so frustrated with the parking situation. They pay parking passes, and during events, whether it's, River Cats or other events or things at the barn even, their parking lot gets filled and they have no space and they pay for parking. That doesn't make sense to me. I think we have to be careful with some of the language in here about parking, and I just don't think it's right to require people that have had their homes for 50 years or whatever in their family, they now have to pay for a parking permit for street parking in front of their own home. Makes no sense. So there's a lot of other issues. 300 pages is a lot to read through and try to digest. I am glad that the chicken situation got handled a little better than it was written. That people, after we encourage people, being that you weren't at the council meeting or the commission meetings I spoke at, we encouraged people for years to have hens in their backyard to lay eggs for their family, and then we're going to count them as a domestic animal. That makes no sense, because to have viable eggs for a family of 4, and I know this from doing it at my house, 3 hens is a minimum. So anyway, just there. Bye.
And Steve Patek.
I prefer to go left if you have other speakers.
You're last.
Well, I'm here to tell you that I was shocked to hear that you were considering a modernization of the zoning code. After all, it was a mere 28 years ago when I rewrote the then Yolo County Code into the West Sacramento zoning ordinance. So apparently some people think that's a long time. But I have read the entire new ordinance, and I'd like to share my thoughts with you. I love the diagrams and drawings that have been included, a very large, robust amount of them. They're extremely helpful in explaining things to people and explaining codes. A picture really is worth 1,000 words. And we also have the 1,000 words in this code. It's pretty obvious. I really love the inclusion of the form-based design requirements. They're kind of the basic no-brainer design requirements. We have enforced those over the years through specific plans and plan developments and other ways, but this is a much more, I think, certain and consistent approach to it. With the form-based codes and with the there's a great deal of flexibility that's also built into this ordinance. I really think that with the form-based code requirements, the additional information in this and the flexibility, you should start being really suspicious about anyone wanting to do a new plan development, to be honest. When I took over, virtually every new development area in the city was in a plan development because everybody knew the Yolo County Code was not adequate for handling development. So we had 28 different zoning ordinances in the town. We've gotten rid of virtually all of those plan developments over the years, and I I hope we don't have to see very many more of them. The fences, I thought that prohibiting chain link fence as a material, but allowing 4 feet of height was a brilliant, elegant solution to the fence problem in the north. Apparently that was not well received as we knew it. There are some things that we have known have been issues that we've sort of, for 30 years since incorporations. Similar one is RV parking. I think we actually have adequate RV parking storage facilities now, which we didn't used to have. But as I said to the Planning Commission, good luck with that one. The sign ordinance has been substantially revised. They took out my bonus provisions for size, which I brought down from Arcata, which I thought really worked well. And I will say that the sign ordinance is one of the things I am most proud of, and I think has made a major difference. And I have a little more than 3 minutes, if you would indulge me.
You know I can't. Okay, by separate settlement agreement, but you can't have a whole nother 3.
Okay. Allowing single-family housing parking requirements to be met in the front setback. That is a huge change. And I think one that is very consistent with the whole direction of where the planning profession is going and a whole attitude towards parking as a resource in our world. Outdoor dining, we have a new regulation on outdoor dining, and the only thing I would say is, and isn't it incredible that we are actually having to deal with that as an issue? There is a very extensive addition of an amortization of non-conforming use provision, spelling out how that would be done, what the criteria would be, and I have a reasonable suspicion of what that's going to be used on, and I say go for it. They have promised that the final electronic version will be hyperlinked. You'll be able to click on a word that's used in a sentence, and it'll take you to the definition of that word if it's in the ordinance, and back and forth from sections and so forth. Something I really wanted to do back in 1991, but it would have probably taken more time than rewriting the zoning ordinance. I would say overall, I think the new ordinance is well-written, comprehensive, very well organized, and maybe it's an improvement.
All right, thank you, Mr. Patek. All right, and I hope for for the staff in the Community Development Department that's worked on this, that very few people in their lives get the opportunity for someone of that stature in the history of their work to come back and give that kind of very, knowing Mr. Patek, that was all very, very heavy praise. And deserved. So thank you for taking the time to come out tonight too, Steve. All right, so those are all the public comments. So we will, did I even open the public hearing, Mr. City Attorney? I'm going to retroactively open the public hearing, incorporate all of the public testimony that has just been provided and not require that anyone repeat it, and now close the public hearing and turn to the council for further questions or discussion. Councilmember Sandy?
Well, we had a public workshop on this, and I know we've talked a lot about the ordinance issue and actually gave some direction in December. I didn't know if a member of the staff wanted to address any of the questions that were brought up tonight, to illuminate things for us. I don't have any personal questions, just because we went through this in December and gave you feedback, you addressed it and came back to us, and I really appreciate Mr. Patek being here as well to give us his impressions and his kudos.
So we'll address some of the comments. The RV and boat parking and the fencing, we originally had some ideas for that. Oh, is it not on?
Speak into it, I think.
Okay.
And
So
if you could focus principally on the questions.
the questions, yes.
As opposed to the comments.
So there was a question about why it was mentioned about being a contingency in the agenda report for the RV and boat parking. And that's principally because that was one of the most controversial items that was mentioned the most. And the agenda report says it won't come back unless directed to come back. The parking, there was a question about paying for why current residents who've been living in a neighborhood for a while need to pay for parking. The zoning ordinance doesn't address the parking permit program and the paying, the requirement for the paying of that.
Is that it? Okay. All right, then, comments?
Yeah,
Councilmember Ledesma?
I just want to say thank you. This is, obviously, we did have the workshop, so I'm not going to repeat. But, and Mr. Patek, thanks for somebody I worked with in my early days in the Planning Commission. Good to see you back here and providing your perspective on this huge endeavor that took, it was 28 years in the making. So to the staff, great job. I do want to compliment you on following up on the items we had brought up in the last workshop, and also on the zoning use on how you utilized the conditional use permits for liquor sales. We had that debate last year around other ways to manage liquor sales so that it just makes more sense to have the ability for grocery stores and others that are larger, the people we want to be able to purvey sales and where it's controlled and all the security and everything else versus smaller where it could be more problematic and has been. So this gives us an avenue to sort of address that going forward. So kudos to you for working that in. So other than that, I think this is a remarkable job and appreciate all the work you've done on it.
Councilmember Guerrero?
Yes, I wanted to go back to the comments that, well, there are comments from two folks from the community that provided. One is any revisions that would be done, if you can help explain, I think there is a process for review of modifications to ZOMP. If, there is, I think, several hearings that are required. There's a workshop, and then there's maybe a hearing, and then it'll be brought to City Council. So there are about 3 hearings already in place. That's our current process. Even though it's not mentioned here, I think that, I just wanted to confirm that.
Yes, that's generally correct. We would take any modification to Planning Commission for a workshop and then a second meeting for public hearing, and then it would come before City Council for first reading and second reading.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that Ms. Ramsey understands that that process is already in place. And also, Ms. Langford's comment about, I think you answered the question already, but I just want clarification. As far as the parking modifications, their permit parking is currently in place, and it's not there's no modification to that?
The permit parking program is a separate program. The zoning ordinance regulates how much parking is required for any new development or for somebody who's doing improvements to an existing project. But in terms of managing parking and how much it costs and whether somebody gets a permit or not, that's managed separately. That's a different program.
Okay. And then also in terms of how much time you've spent with the public reviewing ZOMP, how much time would you say we spent?
Well, we started this effort in the summer of 2017, and then we were doing workshops through the spring and summer of 2018. I think we've over 10 workshops and open houses, and we've had on the city website, we've had it on the community development page and the planning division page. Our communications have been through Twitter and social media. They've been online.
Mm-hmm.
We've definitely have tried to reach out and get public comment. And then we got a decent amount of people to turn out last fall for our workshops. And we'll always like to try and get as much public comment in as early as we can.
Mm-hmm.
But it is hard to reach people. So we're trying to figure out different ways to do that.
Thank you. And whatever feedback you have, as we look at our strategic planning session, that's one of my recommendations, is to look at ways to provide strong communication for feedback, for such as the work you're doing, so that you have a lot of input on what's going on with decisions that are taking place out here. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Orozco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm one of the only two council members that are sitting at the dais right now that hasn't previously had planning commission experience. And I will say that this document was very user-friendly, very actually pleasant to read and easy to navigate, which I find would be a great trend for a lot of the documents we have in the city. So that way, anybody with any level of education can actually look through there and easily find what they're looking for. So that's really important. So kudos to you. And I do echo and appreciate Mr. Patek's comments about the diagrams even. I mean, because as he said, those pictures do speak 1,000 words in addition to the 1,000 words. I think that I was informed that the Planning Commission received this document and reviewed it a great number of times. Is it eight times? Is that appropriate to say?
That sounds about correct.
Okay. So I'd like to, on behalf of the council, thank our Planning Commission for their hard work, for opening up their meetings to listening to the feedback from our community. I know as I read through it, I had my concerns, especially being in an area of the city that predates the August 23rd, 1984, and being an owner of a boat and an RV, and having neighbors who express similar concerns about a prohibition, that I felt that we came, and I think the council, after talking about this extensively at our last meeting, came to the right decision, and strongly believes. And I think that the way I understood it, there was just a question as to what the significance was for 1984, but not necessarily a condition that once we find out what that answer is, we were going to reopen discussions about whether or not we should have RVs and boats, but rather it was just a question posed out in the universe. And I'd still like to know what that is, but thank you for all your hard work and for this presentation and for making this easy for us.
I agree. All comments that have been made, including on this issue of essentially the letter to the future on some of these issues that were highly controversial may come back in the future. We have no intention of doing that at this point, but we also didn't. We had an extensive conversation about them here at the council in the last meeting. We didn't spend 6 months on those topics. So although I did not support, and I still don't support the original staff proposals on fences or RVs or boats. I also didn't reach a point where I believed it was important. We didn't do enough work on that to say, yes, there should be a constitutional amendment that would prohibit anybody from ever considering that again. That's been the fact that it's highly controversial doesn't mean it's not it's a live issue. It has been since 1984. So the letter to the future, I think, is simply that to future councils. Look, we looked at this, we didn't do it. And we're not recommending it, but it's also a reminder to all of us that it could come back. So I thought that was a fair way to characterize it, because I think originally the language that you had last time was sounded like it might come back in 6 months from now, or you watch out, it could be tomorrow, you just never know. And I think this language is much clearer, that we have no plan of bringing this back, but it could in the future. But it will have to go through the process that Councilmember Guerrero described, and even that would be an expedited. That would be an unusually expedited process. I mean, this certainly was not just 2 public hearings and a workshop. This time around, as you've described, it's been a lot of notice. So I think the right decisions happened in this case. I do hope for some of the folks who were out, agitating and telling people that, the city was coming to get them, and that the staff was evil and all this stuff. It was not pleasant. And so in addition to all the work, I want to express, to the staff, that we know you care about the community, and that the issues that you were taking up, that staff proposed, even those that we ultimately didn't adopt through the democratic process in the city, through the Planning Commission, and ultimately to the council. You were raising those issues because we had raised them as a community all the way back to the very first general plan. You were doing your job on behalf of the citizens of the community. And I'm sorry that for some folks, they projected malice onto staff. But I think you know that the community believes in what it is that you're doing and supports the kind of progress that's contained in this ordinance. So thank you to the whole team that's worked on this. I know a lot of people have put a lot of effort into this, and as the Mayor Pro Tem has said, the Planning Commission as well. They had much more contentious, longer sessions on this than we did. And they did a lot of good work in order to listen and to hear not just the arguments, but also to hear the real stories from people about, okay, here's what this looks like. This makes a lot of logical sense, but here's what it looks like in my life, which is exactly what the Planning Commission's job is, and they did it. They did it a lot, and they did it really well. So appreciate that. All right. With that, if there's no other comments, is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
With recommended action.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That brings us to item 13, which is workshop on the project elements for the West Capitol Avenue Road Rehabilitation and Safety Enhancement Project.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Candido Ramirez. I'm a senior civil engineer for the Department of Public Works, and I am here to present an update on the West Capitol Avenue Road Rehabilitation and Safety Enhancement Project. If you could back up, please. This project is approximately 3 miles in length, and it extends from the west end at Enterprise Boulevard, continues along West Capitol Avenue to Jefferson Boulevard. The last piece is along Jefferson Boulevard to Park Boulevard. And it, on the bottom of that graphic that you see there, it shows the lane designation that is being proposed for this project. So the western segment of the project will have 1 lane in each direction, plus a left turn lane, followed by a single lane in the westbound direction, 2 lanes in the eastbound direction. And that segment stretches from Interstate 80 to Harbor Boulevard. The remainder of the project will include 2 westbound lanes and 2 eastbound lanes. And obviously on Jefferson Boulevard, there are 2 lanes in each direction, but north and south. On that, before we move on from this, a segment from Sycamore Avenue to Jefferson Boulevard, as you'll see later, will be proposed to be modified from 3 lanes in each direction to the 2 lanes in each direction, which is what the exhibit shows. Before I proceed with the presentation, I'll give you a brief background. Staff applied for the first grant on this project back in 2016, and staff presented conceptual plans as we were developing a scope for the project to TMI Commission and City Council 18 months ago. On last spring, the council approved a design contract with Mark Thomas Company to assist the city with this work. Since then, we have been diligently working on simultaneous public outreach, technical studies, the environmental document, alternative analysis evaluations, and to date, we have a 60% design for the project. A similar presentation was made to TMI Commission last week.
And we ask for the same recommendations and input that we're going to ask of you. The goals of this project are essentially to improve the safety and mobility for all users, and that includes vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. And the way to accomplish that will be to rehabilitate the pavement that along the entire corridor, modify vehicle travel lanes, modify and add bike lanes, add and improve pedestrian crossings, upgrade some curb ramps, and close some sidewalk gaps which exist. Last component is adding street light to a segment that does not currently have street lighting. And another important piece that needs attention is the signalization upgrade at Jefferson and Merkley Avenue. The last two pieces that bullets that you see there are underground infrastructure, which we want to do to avoid tearing up the road in the future. And that is upgrading some water lines and adding conduit for future communications fiber optic. This is a bird's eye view of the project, but first let me explain what exists. And this is approximately west of West Acre Road. There are currently 6 travel lanes, so 3 in each direction, with many driveways along the entire segment. So it's complex in that the combination of bike lanes and driveways create many conflicts. Just between Jefferson and Sycamore, we counted at least 50 driveways that currently have conflicts. So the way to improve the safety of those conflicts will be by adding the bike lanes, but also highlighting those conflicts, which is what you see in the green shading there on this exhibit. The red shading that you see are existing driveways which are clearly abandoned or not used. So we simply plan on keeping those driveways as they are, but blocking them by adding buffer lanes and the bike lanes. If we can proceed to the next slide, it'll have a different perspective of the proposed improvements. So if you were standing, let's say, near Rayleigh's and looking in this direction, from left to right, you will see a bike lane, a buffered area between the bike and the travel lane, and you'll see a reflective marker which acts as a visual deterrence and partial physical deterrence. And then you have the 2 travel lanes followed by the existing median. On the right-hand side is basically symmetrical to the other side. So before we proceed, this is what we're recommending for the segment from from Poplar to Jefferson Boulevard. Next, we have the Jefferson Boulevard segment, which we're recommending to keep as it is, and that is not add designated Class 2 bike lanes. And the reason for that are 3 reasons. We have limited right-of-way, high traffic volumes, and higher speeds. However, we're not fully closing the door on provided an alternative bike lanes for this segment. What you see here is an option that you may consider, and that is by reducing the travel lanes from 12 to 13 feet, which is existing dimensions. We reduce them to 11 feet. That will encourage the vehicle speeds to be reduced, but it also allow a 5-foot, approximately 5-foot shoulder along the edges that would allow cyclists that are going to insist on using this pathway to use it. But I want to stress that it will not be designated as a bike lane. It won't be striped, and it won't be signaled, signed as a bike lane. Public outreach on this project has been aggressive. I'm fortunate to have inherited the project with the amount of outreach that was committed by the consultant. I've only highlighted a few of the meetings that took place, or the most important meetings. The first one took place back in August, and it was predominantly catered to the businesses along the corridor. So the first meeting was for the businesses on the west side of the corridor, and it was held here at the City Galleria. It was well attended. We received positive feedback. Second one was also catered for the businesses along the east side of the corridor. Again, we had good attendance and encouraging comments. The next meetings are pop-up workshops, which we went out in the field and identified 2 locations that we felt would get the attention of those users. And one of them was at the Yolo Causeway bike path at the west end of the project. Consistent with the other meetings, we had a lot of feedback, but especially from the bike users. And even KCRA showed up and had an article on that. The next one was catered to the users near Joey Lopes Park. We felt that there was a good level of people that congregated there. Again, we were pleased with the results of that workshop. Second to last is a community meeting held here at the Galleria. And we had an attendance of approximately 40 people, including police and fire showed up. Again, we had very good feedback from them. Last is the virtual workshop, which is an online questionnaire. Approximately 10 questions were asked of the public, and that received over 300 comments from the public. Most were positive. I think the most pessimistic comment was, why hasn't the project been constructed yet? And this is why the project has taken a while, and that is the environmental document. That process is fairly lengthy. We've been working on it since May, but we're at the stage where we can finalize it by the end of this month and circulate it for public comment. And if that's successful, we'll certify the document by March and hopefully begin construction by summer of this year, with completion anticipated in the fall of 2020. Okay, to summarize, these are the 3 items that we're seeking your recommendation on. And one of them is to consider whether or not to allow street parking on a segment between Poplar and Jefferson. Staff's opinion is not to, but you're welcome to provide your opinion, your direction. The second one is to whether or not to allow bike lanes on Jefferson Boulevard. Staff's opinion is not to stripe it with bike lanes and basically leave it as it is. And the last item that we need your recommendation on is essentially to adopt the travel lane configuration, which was on the first slide of this presentation. And with that, that ends the presentation. Vin Kay and Chris Doherty are here to help me answer questions.
All right, are there questions for staff before we go to the public comment?
I have one question. The buffers that I saw in the diagram, are those actually raised like colored posts?
Yes, they're flexible posts with reflective markers. If, let me show you. I think, if you can go to slide 17, please. You'll see, 17. That's essentially what they'll look like.
In that color?
Well, no, I think they're options. They're options. But, so that depicts the post with reflective markers, but also it depicts the buffer area, which will be striped similar to what you see.
When deciding on that kind of buffer, I mean, for example, we have the bike lane widening on Linden Loop where the buffers are smaller and triangular to, I guess, delineate where the bike route is. What was the deciding factor behind choosing this particular design?
Well, you mean on the post?
Correct.
Okay. That's recommended and staff recommended by the consultant, and we're in concurrence with it. But one of the reasons is it acts as a, like I said, a visual deterrence.
Yeah.
But also as a partial deterrent. So if a vehicle can run over it, but hopefully that'll alert the driver to get back on the lane. And similarly, alert a cyclist. But they basically, they're flexible, so they get pushed over, but they don't break off. Yeah.
Are they any more effective in deterring a car into going to the bike lane in the same way or in a different way than the ones that are just raised a foot off the ground?
I'm not entirely sure which ones are at Linden, but they're actually a vertical curve, right, Ben, at Linden?
Yes. The curb stops at Linden were used to really separate the space between the parking area and the bike lane. They were used so cars were kind of pulling in so they would not bump into and extend into the bike lane while cyclists were going by. These really function a little bit differently, as when you are looking down the street, they do offer that kind of a visual wall and a separation and a feeling of comfort for both the drivers and the cyclists. So they have a little bit of a functional difference.
I didn't think about the parking. It's not just thoroughfare. Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
All right, other questions at this point? All right, thank you. We had one request for public comment by Justine Herrig.
Hi. So I bike, walk, and drive along West Capitol. So I very much support this project wholeheartedly, and I'm excited to see it come to fruition. I participated in some of the public outreach, which I really appreciate. Thank you. That was great. So the staff are looking for 3 recommendations that he outlined, and so I agree with no parking on West Capitol at all, so I think that just makes it a safer, user-friendly for bicyclists. I also agree with the green things, whatever color you choose, but I agree with those versus the little things on Linden. I want to focus on talking about the options on Jefferson. I understand that because of the limitations of the freeway, extending it or making more room to add a bike lane is not feasible. So going other options to use signage to go to Westacre or 5th Street, that's fine. However, I use 5th Street a lot to come through the back end to South River Road, 15th Street, Jefferson. And so that section of Fifth that goes under the freeway and where there is an on-ramp to the freeway, it's very busy, and there are no bike lanes on either side of that road. This, if the city is going to direct cyclists to use Fifth Street to get to South River Road, 15th or Jefferson, I urge the city to look into improving that section to promote safety for cyclists. The road improvements that were recently completed on Fifth Street between Tower Bridge Gateway and C Street, they're super awesome. I love them. Thank you. So I'm happy that you did that. So it would be excellent to have what you've done there, maybe to extend down Fifth under the freeway, even go maybe as far as South River Road to Locks Drive, because South River Road has uneven pavement and it's deteriorating where there is kind of like bike lanes there. I've heard from friends in Southport who want to come up to like the barn area. They're not uncomfortable with riding up that back way because it's really horrible intersection, especially at night. There's no lights in that section. Likewise, I know cyclists that come during the summer from Sacramento down that area, Fifth to South River to Locks to the Barge Canal Trail to ride the levees. So again, just trying to improve that. So to summarize, I like the project and I'm excited to see it move forward. Just note that the alternative bike routes that you're trying to use to promote besides Jefferson, they're not as friendly currently. So if there are, if you're not considering improving it now, please consider improving them now, or if there are plans to improve those areas for cyclists, I would appreciate hearing from the city or the council, maybe just what plans might be in the works, or if there's like a general timeline when you think those improvements might come to fruition. Thank you.
I think you might like this answer that's about to come. Thanks, Tristan. Mr. Doherty?
Yes. It's nice to be able to give a good answer on this. It is probably the number one requested item I get for all requests of infrastructure in the city. And we're pleased to say that we have identified as a project, have secured grant funding for it to add, at this point, a two-way cycle track on the east side of Fifth Street from 15th to Bridge Street. That will add additional right-of-way, create a much safer, more comfortable environment for people to get under that facility, completely remove the conflict from the turning traffic onto the on-ramp. So it is probably one of the better possible solutions. We are currently in design on that project, and I know we're looking to get to construction as soon as possible on that.
Good answer. Okay. Great. Yeah. Before you sit down, Chris, so I think this Jefferson issue, and I bike a lot. Biking is, and I'd like to have a bike lane everywhere possible. I think at the last meeting I raised a question for myself: would I actually do this? You're the bike fanatic, the most fanatical bike person on the staff, and you've been. I'm sure you've been looking at this now.
Sure.
Now. Without any penalty that Denix or somebody might put on you, is your best advice a no bike option, the recommended no bike lane of any type on Jefferson, or the secondary option that's listed here, or full-blown bike lane, or some other alternative as the bike lanes that you put on?
So there's a couple minds on this. The option came to us kind of late a couple days ago, so we included it into the presentation as an option to go. It would provide a very narrow bike lane-like separated environment for those who are using it, and there are a fair amount of people who do ride through here, whether it's cyclists like myself or whether it's someone who's just dependent on it for transportation. On one side, it does provide some level of shelter and protection, but it's a very narrow, non-bike lane environment. But as we've found, people do take the path of least resistance and distance, so it's hard to deflect people all the time around. Plus, I would recommend, at a minimum, the wayfinding around is the right approach, because we do have areas around, such as Drever, such as Fifth, such as Westacre, but to find some kind of facility in this environment might benefit those who do ride it consistently.
And as we've been talking about it, as the analysis all been on the full length of Jefferson from West Capitol down to
Park.
But there's really there's two journey experiences there. There's West Capitol to Merkley, which is part of part of the overall central business district, and then there's Merkley to Park. Merkley to Park as a cyclist and a pedestrian and everything, that's Anna as a driver. I mean, as all three, that's the worst, and it's unfixable. I mean, just because of the freeway. So that's unfixable. It's also not as critical. But I'm curious whether or not a different solution is appropriate for just the one block on Jefferson between Merkley and West Capitol, or not.
It's difficult to conceptualize, but actually the stretch from Merkley to West Capitol is tighter.
Yeah,
and has
no,
less
I did not
opportunity
know.
for a facility on it than the section under the freeway. So it is easier, honestly, to get people to Merkley and then to route people around than it would be to bridge that one block. But at that point, because of the stacking traffic and the slowing of the traffic when they're stacked up, it does offer, most people just ride straight through on Jefferson up to West Capitol Avenue. But it is a very constricted, very tight space there, which is one of the difficulties we're having in this, designing an ample bike lane through there.
It's the road geometry. There's also pretty. I mean, I don't know what is the right term for this?
The road crown?
The road, yeah.
Yes.
It's a severe road crown. So.
Yes.
Yeah, because that was going to be my question as well, is this, I didn't get the sense from the staff report that this recommendation was, how strong you were in this belief, because I worry about and I know it's a very busy intersection and it's very tight as it is, and I was wondering how the heck are you going to fit it, but the issue is that people do ride it now. And I know TMI came back with a recommendation, I think, of installing wayfinding signage and providing alternative routes, and I totally 100% agree with Justine's comments about, if we're going to offer that, we got to make those changes too, which we had good news about. But we still have a responsibility. It's the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and they're going to take it. And so I'm just thinking out loud, which is dangerous here, but it just seems like where we're at that stretch between Merkley and West Capitol, just to put the buffer in, because people are using it anyway, just seems, it might be something we want to consider, and I'm not married to that idea or not. It's a kind of a nice thing, you can't go, I get it, this is not until property owners on both sides are ready to sort of reconfigure that whole stretch. But a lot of people use that area. I see jump bikes and regular bikes, people using it, and they'll end up in the parking lot of not Rite Aid. I'm thinking of the drugstore there and whatever it is. Yeah, Walgreens. Thank you. To kind of avoid it, but.
I would add the other additional benefit to doing that would be to constrict the lanes down, which would then have a traffic calming effect as well.
Well, I was going to bring up that example because we thought about the opening of 5th Street with the McGowan Bridge and what that would bring by way of all of a sudden we're going to have this conflict between bikes and trucks and the traffic going through there. And, we still have that conflict, but I see people do slow down. People do when there's bikes and whatever else along that very thin stretch on 5th Street from 15th down to the McGowan Bridge. It's the same sort of element, and people will use it to get there. There's no bike lane there, and I would venture to guess that the crowning of that road is equally with the because there's no sidewalk or anything there. There was a little bit off ramp to go off to on 5th Street, but again, it's just a thought I think we need to consider, and I'm not advocating that we add the bike lane, but at this point, because I know it's just I worry about the congestion there, but.
Yeah, in South River, it was an example where, it's an utterly imperfect bike and pedestrian facility, but it was either that or not open up to anybody for generations. So, we got to find places where we can make work what we can, and recognize that some people will do those things. So, so to that point, I'm just trying to, if you're going to continue to use that stretch yourself, I guess I'm conflicted, like what I would feel safer in, because in this little 5-foot unmarked or unstriped thing that I would be in, and if I stray out of it, because once that thing is there, if I stray out of it, then I have to deal with road rage or drivers who are like, get back in your bike lane. That's only 5 feet wide, and there's grates and other stuff in the middle of it, so you have to get out sometimes. Whether I'd feel safer in that, or whether just like in the center of the lane, which is my legal right. To use the full vehicular lane. So I guess that, what's your advice? Like, what would you prefer to ride? And what did we hear from some of the community?
Could I ask a related question? Are there places in the city, I should be aware of this, but I'm not, because I work in Woodland, and down Main Street, you see, because it's just 2 lanes, you see the painting of the bicyclist can use this whole lane. So I was trying to think of a solution too, and I didn't know if that could be put on the Jefferson, just for that segment, that you can ride in the lane there. Not that I personally would do that, because everyone here knows about my bicycling prowess, but there, I was wondering about that as well.
So this is Vin's cue to tell us that was in the proposal last time, and I think
I just don't know if how much we use that here.
Yes.
Yeah. When we did originally bring this to you, it did involve Sharrows was an option, and that was, I think, widely rejected by the council at that time as being not a comfortable environment for cyclists. And a Sharrow really is not a true facility, as it is an expression of the law that currently exists, that a cyclist does have full allowed use of the lane. So it's a complicated issue in this stretch when we just have very little options to go back and forth on. Did you want to add something?
Yes. I would like to add a couple of comments for council's consideration. I've actually observed one of our colleagues from finance or HR who utilizes that route, and she actually gets on the sidewalk on the western side to get past these, on-ramps and off-ramps. Realistically, we have not gotten the design exceptions for Caltrans to reduce the travel lanes. We anticipate that we think we can get that, but from a liability standpoint and traffic engineering oversight, we are concerned about squeezing substandard lanes between substandard travel lanes. And that portion with access to the freeway is part of the truck route. So yes, what we did along South River Road between McGowan Bridge and 15th Street really enhanced the opportunity for cyclists to utilize that. Technically, most people don't realize those are not bike lanes. They're just fog lines, and we actually narrow the travel lanes to 11-foot wide, and that did reduce, traffic. But for this particular stretch, which is why we're not recommending putting bike lanes in. Now, the portion that's north of Merkley to West Capitol, we are considering possibly reducing the sidewalk width on the eastern corner to see if we can possibly squeeze in a bike lane there to get folks, going north.
At Merkley and Jefferson?
Actually, at West Capitol and Jefferson. Okay. So from Merkley to West Capitol, we could possibly add a bike lane if we reduce the width of the sidewalk.
Mayor Pro Tem Orozco.
Well, a lot of my questions have been answered with respect to Jefferson. I'm pleased to announce that as the last, few years, I have been an emerging bike rider along with my family, but actually incorporated into going to work, which was a big surprise to everybody who knows me. And as far as my first impressions, driving that route and using a lane, I was terrified. And it wasn't very encouraging to me, obviously, as I imagine it would be the same for a lot of people in our community. But I am optimistic about what I've seen with respect to the report on West Cap. And thank you for your presentation, sir. It's great to have you here. I think about West Capitol, and I mean, we've had our variety of, incidences that have occurred, some that have nothing to do with the road and just necessarily by the circumstances under which the people were utilizing that space. But I do see a lot of people who have, scooters and, not scooters, but electric scooters and like wheelchairs and strollers trying to get across West Capitol with two, lanes of traffic going back and forth. Sometimes you can never see them until you're right up on them. And I'm delighted to hear that that might be a safer route for a lot of people to navigate. It's also my hope that, we would have people feeling more comfortable going from City Hall to the Goodwill, or, just even if it's, just to the Sycamore Trail route, which I see as under construction. I'm really happy to see that. I took a picture and actually sent it to people because I was just really excited about new access points. I'm optimistic about what we got going here in West Sacramento, especially considering that 3 years ago I'd never even considered riding bikes on Jefferson, which I have braved with, if you've seen the choo-choo train, Orozco Yepes family, we have 6 people on bikes, and it takes a while for us to cross an intersection. So our safety, especially under that underpass we're talking about on 5th, is always a consideration. But I appreciate the presentation. I was hopeful for better news as far as Jefferson, and I really was glad that Mr. Mayor asked that question because, as much as I want to use the path of least resistance to get to where I want to go, in Jefferson being it, I also don't want to create another safety hazard for our motorists on the road, which might not serve our bicyclists in the long run anyway. So I'm more inclined to use the alternative access points, even though they are a little bit less user-friendly, or not user-friendly, but convenient lengthwise. But anyhow, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the work you do, Chris, and Vin, and the staff, because this is a new direction for our city, and I really hope that we that residents in our city start getting the confidence to get out there and out of their cars and on their bikes.
You're going back to general comments, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. I'm excited about all these pieces of funding that have come together for this. I know that there isn't a lot of on-street parking already on Jefferson, so I think creating a more safe environment for motorists, for cyclists, and for pedestrians makes sense to me without taking some of the, there's nothing really to take away, so it's just kind of clarifying that this is a no on-street parking, that it is a main corridor. I'm glad we're kind of grappling with the Jefferson issue, because I was trying to figure out how the wayfinding signs might actually work. Do you actually prohibit cycling? What happens there? And I couldn't come up with an answer, so I'm glad we're at least talking about it, not that we've come up with an answer there. And then I think that the proposed lane configurations make sense to me, as taking the 3 to 2, et cetera. And I think, I'm sure that all the traffic studies kind of support that configuration as well. It seems to make sense to me. And I'm just excited that the funding's here to actually move forward.
Councilmember Guerrero.
I just want to thank staff for the very good presentation and doing all the outreach that you have done in soliciting feedback. It, I think, is really important, given lessons learned, making sure that, if we're going to be making some adjustments on the streets, and residents are, and business, people that do business here, or anybody passing through our city is frequenting and using our streets, that they have an understanding that there will be changes and are taking part in looking at what we can do to make it more bike-friendly, which is something I'm, supportive of as well, in making it safe for bikers to travel through our city. And this, since I'm not a biker, I had to really spend a lot of time trying to understand the presentation and understand, what exactly a biker's experience is like. And Chris, I appreciate you, providing some insight, and Mayor Cabalden and Karina Roscoe, is looking at it not just from, commuters, but family who are traveling together and trying to keep it safe. My recommendations would lean towards, what folks have, the community have provided feedback on, and taking a look at slowing traffic down just a little bit. I don't have a problem with that, so that we have safer roads. Sometimes I think that what we've experienced on West Capitol Avenue has been due to high speed, and high speeds and lighting is another factor. So to the extent we can take that into consideration, because as like tonight it gets dark at 5 o'clock, people are still riding around, and or in the early morning hours. It's really hard for people to see, and they're just driving very quickly. So we maybe take a look at reflectors on the road or whatever else it takes, so that we can provide some sense of security for both the pedestrians and the bikers. So looking at incorporating some of that as well. So to the extent that I think we reduce some parking, and provide more safety, I think that's okay. I think that's important. And just moving forward in providing public input and outreach and education, I don't want to slow that down. I want to continue to provide that outreach and education, so folks don't all of a sudden see these roads changed, and that's the negative impact we receive. We continue to provide them with education and understanding that this is an improvement for public safety.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, staff, again, for the presentation and addressing this issue, which we've been grappling with for a few years now, and now we have the funding, we can move forward. I do have the issue on Jefferson. I think we've beaten, but that was kind of our main sort of question is around how we would deal with that. And I think while I would like to challenge the notion of having not having that extra line there, and I was just looking at the satellite photos of it. It is really tight as it is, and I've been on it as both a bicyclist and obviously in a vehicle, and it's just I think of those who are seasoned bicyclers who know the rules of the road and can manage it. They'll continue to manage it, and going with what the TMI group suggested is on the wayfinding way and finding alternative routes. So we'll have to kind of back into the alternative routes, make sure it's well marked, and so that will be kind of my guidance on that going forward. I do want to just discuss a little bit about the on-street parking, and I agree with it with this change. But I know that even this is not a streetscape project, and so we couldn't solve everything because we have on-street parking right out in front, across the street at the City College and in front of Carroll's, and along that route. And I don't. So I'm supportive of this action because the goals are around traffic safety and pedestrian bike safety, and it achieves that. And we had talked about some time ago streetscaping continuing down. There are businesses that are on West Capitol, west of here, and folks that are investing in businesses, in the former King's Restaurant and the new Salt and Water, I think it's called. Their business investing there, and there's plenty of parking behind them. I get it, but I think part of what we need to consider is, and I don't want to just default to there would never be on-street parking there. I just don't want to get into that thinking, because I think West Capitol still has a lot of potential with the public projects we're contemplating. Private projects, housing projects that are being contemplated there will drive new investment, that there is a benefit to having some on-street parking as well in terms of slowing down. I just don't want it to become a passing through travel lane that people just pass through. It's exactly what, what I don't think West Capitol still remains probably our main street here. And on-street parking and just to be able to stop, slow down, and creating opportunities to visit, I think it should be a long-term goal we think about. So while I'm comfortable with this recommendation and the safety, what it will mean, and when we get to whenever that will be in streetscaping, I just don't want that to be the overriding goal as we think about that going forward. Because we do want that kind of investment. We do want storefronts improved downstream, so small businesses and larger businesses, housing projects, and others have a bit of character along West Capitol. And I think that on-street parking can help that. Other than that, I know you brought up as well the signal improvements. So can somebody just tell me the signal improvements at Merkley and Jefferson is exactly what that will mean, briefly?
Yeah, essentially, the signal at Jefferson and Markley, the lane configurations are incorrect. So the turn movements are not protected, the left turn movements.
Yes, okay, that's what I wanted to make sure.
So
Yeah, it's not explicit in
that's
the-
something
okay.
that was in our CIP for a while, and finally with this project, we're able to get around to it.
And that will help as well with the alternative routes, right? In
Yes,
terms of bicyclists that are coming down Merkley to continue crossing Jefferson, going east or the other way. Okay, I'm 100% approval of that. So I was hoping you'd say that. So thank you.
So it was my predecessor on the council, it's the one right next to Cindy Tuttle on the wall, Roland Hensley, that first proposed the very first bike lane, the one that extends from the causeway all the way down West Capitol Avenue. So and that also removed all street parking except for one segment between Westacre and Jefferson. And he was doing it for reasons that we wouldn't recognize tonight necessarily. He definitely was not a cyclist. But he was attempting to stop trucks from parking in front of motels and using the services of prostitutes. That was the reason for the very first of the bike lanes, and it's the reason for the parking restrictions. But he wanted to be able to park in front of Bank of America, so parking was still allowed in that one block, with the wayfinding intention for bicyclists to turn right on Westacre, turn left on Merkley, then turn back left again on Jefferson and go back onto West Capitol Avenue. So a lot of hints of what we're talking about tonight were part of the anti-prostitution scheme from 1995. And in some sense, it worked. It also helped to launch a biking, the seeds of a biking movement and a biking culture in the city as well. The wayfinding did not work at all. I never met a single individual who turned right on Westacre, left on Merkley, and left on Jefferson, and right on West Capitol Avenue again, because of exactly the phenomenon that you were describing. And I'm pretty skeptical that most folks will do it now. But some may, especially those who are, they're going on the web and they're looking for Googling, safe bicycling routes for family or whatever. So it may meet a need for a small number of people, but a need that is very profound for a small number of people. So I think the wayfinding is a good, it's an inexpensive, good thing to move forward with. It's not likely, I think, for some of the reasons that you mentioned earlier, to have a big effect on the larger number of cyclists. But I don't see a whole lot of our discussion that hasn't revealed any really great alternatives in this space as well. I guess on the broader, some of the other questions that are here, including the overall lane configurations. Both the item that we're going to take up next on road rehabilitation and the item that we had earlier on scooters, I think both of those, the long-term trajectory is that we need to have as the minimum amount of lane pavement that we absolutely need. That's not been our philosophy. Our philosophy is, okay, how much lane pavement can we get a developer to build? How much lane pavement can we add on as part of this project, or whatever? But we can't afford that any longer. And so to some extent, we're going to have to figure out how much money do we have for road rehabilitation, and we cannot build more roads than that. I mean, we're going to hear from Jesse in a moment, that if you flip it and say, if we build this roads, then we're going to need this much money for road rehab. Maybe we have this much money for road rehab, and therefore we can only have this many roads. And to some extent, this is the quandary that we're going to be in. But at the same time, if more and more people are on bikes and jump bikes and scooters and hoverboards and wheelchairs and everything else, and we're still relying on a bike lane width from 1995 to serve 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times as many people using them. We've misallocated the road space. So for me, looking at these cross sections, the main question for me is did we do enough to convert vehicle lanes into other forms of the public realm, including even bigger bike lanes or even wider sidewalks, or reserving that space for both reasons. One, to make sure that we're not continuing to have road lanes that we can't afford to maintain, and also that we are appropriately expanding the lanes for all these alternative personal mobility modes or micro-mobility modes that people are starting to use in large numbers. I'm not suggesting that we don't build enough roads. Let me be clear. But West Capitol Avenue is a very good example, just as Park Boulevard was 15 years ago, of a road from another century that is way oversized for what it needs to be and for virtually any projection that we have for what it could be in the future. Because if our West Capitol action plan takes off over time, if 10, 15 years from now, the likelihood that the same number of personal vehicle miles driven in individual automobiles is going to be the same as, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's almost certainly not going to be anything like it is today. So for me, that was like the fundamental question here: did you do enough to put West Capitol Avenue on an appropriate diet in order to make sure that we've got just the right amount of road lanes and sufficient space for these alternative modes. The other issue on West Capitol Avenue is that the incidents that we've had on West Cap in terms of safety have been, as Mayor Pro Tem Orozco said, for a lot of different reasons. But even some of the reasons that are not direct can be affected by this. Right? Many of them have been because of that it's unusual for there to be a human being on West Capitol Avenue for most of these stretches, particularly at night. But it's not impossible. It's not like it never happens, not at all. So, but drivers, particularly truck drivers, are not used. They don't expect, cognitively, do not expect that a pedestrian or a cyclist is going to be there. And it's not only lighting, it's not only reflectors and whatever. It's the fact that if you're just driving for a long time and you're not expecting to see a person or somebody like swaggering into the road or a bicycle. So part of what it goes back to the jump bike conversation we were having earlier is the best way to improve the safety of West Capitol Avenue is for more people to be on it. So that drivers have some expectation that they're going to be folks, but also even these barriers. I think some of the folks that we've had wander absent-mindedly into the street It's not like they can't get around the green barriers, but the green barriers are at least one more thing that you have to accidentally do. So I'm encouraged by the proposals that are being made here. They're not a panacea for the safety issues that we've seen, but they're definitely a very strong step, a very strong step forward. So I don't know if you're conferring, Dennis, about whether we've done enough. I'm actually not. If you have an answer, that's great. I mean, I don't have a threshold myself, but I'm curious as to your thinking about and your approach to the diet that you put West Capitol Avenue under at this plan.
Okay. One of the tasks was to evaluate thoroughly the traffic volumes, existing plus future, and they were compared with the uses identified in the general plan, 2035, 2040, I don't recall right now. But the numbers and the level of services along the corridor are in line with what the general plan traffic analysis concluded. And essentially, in an east-west direction, the level of services is on the segments, aside from the intersections of Harbor and Jefferson, they will be A or B, which are comfortable. The general plan allows for level of services down to D, so people could argue that we can get by with one lane in each direction, but we feel, staff and the traffic consultant feel that this is the appropriate configuration.
So based on what then?
Based on the data that was gathered and the analysis that was conducted.
So is your implicit criterion an LOS of A or B? I mean, if it were, I don't know what one lane does. And again, I'm not proposing it, but if one lane is a C and this configuration is an A or a B, is that kind of the ballpark that we're looking at? And staff's determination was we should be shooting for an A or a B? This is definitely not gotcha. This is an evolving policy conversation that we've, as a community, been having for a while, so.
Well, you got me, so.
Let me see if I can help. During the design process, we are certainly cognizant of the CBD zoning from West Acre to Jefferson, which is why we're not proposing permanent barriers like curbs and concrete K-rails that separate cyclists from automobiles. Because in the long run, we may want to give up some of the excess right-of-way for economic development. But in the interim, because of all these driveway conflicts, we want to make it a continuous, safer path for cyclists. And that is the goal. As we move away from using LOS to measure traffic volume, especially with vehicle miles traveled, how we arrive at the decisions more based on access. Again, we have almost 50 driveways from Sycamore Avenue to Jefferson. That's a lot of points for potential conflicts. Adding parking movements across bike lanes also are potential conflict zones. So if we don't have the need for the right-of-way right now, we can stripe it for bike lanes, put in these, I call them bollards, plastic bollards with reflectors, but they do provide a safer separation and make the cyclists feel more at ease. Now, on the other hand, if we were to reduce the vehicle travel lanes too much, and then we make the bicycle lanes too wide, it could end up being a corridor when someone can violate, the intent of that lane and have a car driving down that path. So generally, we don't want the bike lanes wider than 8 feet. 7 feet, 8 feet's ideal. We can make the buffer 8 feet wide with striping and some type of barrier in the center. But your travel lanes for automobiles are typically 12 feet wide, right? So we're okay with widening the lanes up to 8 feet. But if you make it 10 feet wide, someone could drive in there unless you create physical barriers at every intersection or entrance point to that bike lane.
Yeah, I think transportation engineering is going to have to evolve in this space. I get it, because and I've been in bike lanes that cars are in other places, and it's maddening. But I'm imagining the Karina Yepes train of bicyclists, and then Ms. Guerrero on a scooter going at full speed in the same bike lane, and Ms. Andine on a jump bike sorry, Mr. Ledesma on a jump bike at full speed. It's and at which point the same bike lane width is no longer appropriate. So we have to start planning or testing different configurations that is going to, that's going to make that both safe and attractive for travel as well. So, but all of these are mostly just letters to the next item. I mean, not to the literally to the next item, but letters to your future staff work. I'm very comfortable with the proposal that's before us tonight. So. All right, if there's no further discussions. This is a workshop only, so we're going to proceed to item 14, which is a workshop on the 2018 Pavement Management System Update and Pavement Management Plan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Jesse Katkar. I'm an assistant engineer with the Public Works Department. And I'm here to give a presentation on a draft pavement management plan. If we go to the next slide, I'm just going to talk briefly about some background and how we made it to this point. Staff initiated the pavement management system update in March of 2018. The intent of the project was to obtain overall condition of the roadway network within the city, and develop a pavement management plan. Since then, staff has obtained the overall condition and presented that information to the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission, as well as City Council. Following some direction and guidance from Council and the Commission, staff developed a draft pavement management plan that I'm going to present today. After tonight's presentation, staff is expecting to come back to commission once more, and as well as council for approval of a pavement management plan. Some background. The city maintains roughly 437 lane miles of roadway, and this is a network that's continually growing with new development throughout the city. The overall condition of the network is at 60. Kind of, to put that in perspective, that's kind of like the roadway pavement condition on Jefferson Boulevard between Lake Washington and North Linden. This is actually a decline from a pavement condition of 84 in 2005 and 74 in 2013. So like an 84 would be like Village Parkway, almost brand new roadway, really good condition. If the city were to bring all the roadways within the city up to a very good condition, so like that Village Parkway, we would need over $12 million per year over the next 10 years. However, the current revenues that the city has to use for pavement preservation, rehabilitation, and reconstruction include $250,000 from waste management, $500,000 from Measure E, and $1.2 million from SB 1 or Senate Bill 1. Staff is also assuming roughly about $1 million per year in grants, and that's based on our performance in the last 2 funding cycles. So based on that assumption, we have roughly $3 million annually. With those, if that funding level would stay the same for the next 10 years, we're expected to deteriorate towards a pavement condition of 50. To kind of put that in an example or perspective, Jefferson Boulevard from Armfield to the city limits. So if you're headed towards Clarksburg or the sugar mill down in that location, that would kind of give you that idea. And then just for further reference, industrial
between Harbor Boulevard and Boatman before the minor improvements that were done last year was about a 26. If the funding was increased to roughly $6 million per year, we would be able to maintain the roadways in their current approximate overall condition. But even at this condition, we've received right around 300 plus West Sac Connect requests for service for between whether that's potholes or striping that's faded away to the point where it's no longer visible. And this is in addition to 700 plus social media interactions that were captured by Zen City for the keyword pothole during the 2018 calendar year. Because of the projected decrease in pavement condition and the volume of requests for service from West Sac Connect, staff is recommending that on an ongoing annual basis, targeting a necessary funding through the budget process to reach $6 million per year. Possible funding sources could include increases in Measure K, one-time Measure K funds, Measure E, EIFDs, general fund, and additional grants beyond the assumed $1 million per year on average. All right. Now to the draft pavement management plan. The overall intent of the plan is to address the service requests that we have coming in and to maintain the city's major corridors and to ensure economic viability and of existing and new commercial enterprises. In addition to a multi-year plan will more strategically position the city for future grant opportunities. Basically, it defines projects so that we can better identify grants and just put us in a better position and potentially be shovel-ready for some grant opportunities. And so with the information provided on the last slide and council feedback, that's kind of how we developed this plan. And it consists of two programs. One's going to be the Neighborhood Preservation Program. The intent of this program is to focus on preserving and maintaining local roadways. In the image that you see in the slide, staff has broken the city into 10 areas. This is approximately based on land use, major barriers such as freeways, railroad tracks, arterial roadways, and proximity. So we try to group roadways or areas that are together. You don't see any kind of segments just standing out. This leads to more cost-effective projects. Basically, it's keeping a contractor in a similar location and working on similar types of streets that can potentially produce synergies. Because local roadways are not grant eligible, staff is recommending that the Neighborhood Preservation Program be funded at $1.5 million per year. And it's important to note that because our need in these areas exceeds the available funding, this 1.5 will not get you brand new roads in these areas. We will be able to do various seal coats and try to preserve the condition of these roadways so that they don't fall into complete disrepair, and potentially do patch paving and so forth to mend worse off areas. In this slide, you see the proposed projects in the Community Investment Program. The intent of this program is to rehabilitate major arterials and collectors. The methodology for selection of roadway segments is proximity to economic drivers, potential grant eligibility, volumes of traffic, and these are generally the type of programs that contribute to the city's ability to attract and retain businesses. They are commercial corridors. And should the city be able to attain a level of $6 million per year, most of the projects on the list would likely be completed in the next 10 years. Again, there is a portion there's currently 1 million assumed grants per year, and that is just based on the last 2 cycles. And so if we weren't able to hit that target for whatever reason, then there would be a reduction in the number of projects that we complete. There are a few possibilities for enhancements. Currently, CFDs do not contribute to any roadway maintenance. So, however, staff could investigate the formation of CFDs within areas they don't currently exist. I know there's an analysis currently underway for some of the larger development projects that we do have in Southport to determine if placing the roadway maintenance burden within CFDs in those areas is appropriate. And the CFDs could potentially be used in areas that are missing certain infrastructure, such as sidewalks and streetlights, to potentially add those types of amenities in the future. Another possibility is bonding or similar financing means can be explored to expedite projects within the community investment program. There are hurdles, though, potential for a citywide vote, and then there's also the potential that the improvement does not last as long as the bonding will. In summary, the pavement management plan consists of 2 programs. It's a way to kind of preserve our local roadways and give residents some certainty of when we'll be able to get into their area, not necessarily touch every single road, but definitely help preserve and maintain it for the long run. And the community investment program is our major corridors, our Jeffersons, our West Capitol Avenue, which we were successful in getting several grants and tying together several funding sources to get that project rolling. And then recommended funding level. The $6 million per year is kind of what's needed to maintain them in their current level. What staff's asking for is just let's try to get to that point, not necessarily a set aside or a commitment to it, but let's work towards that goal. And then there's the formation of CFDs and bonding, which all this is available for council to comment or give us direction on.
Are there questions for staff outside of the workshop? Or discussion? All right, thanks very much. No, okay. I mean, obviously, this is an issue we've been taking up for several years. It's a severe issue here and in, I think, literally every single city and county in all of California. There's nothing remarkable about West Sacramento, other than that we've made a larger share of local investments in road rehabilitation over the last 15 or 20 years as a result of Measure J and K than the average, than most cities have. But that is not a permanent answer. So we still are facing this challenge, and we're one of the few cities that has implemented something like Measure E with $500,000 a year to support this. So the public has been both interested in it, as you've indicated, and both the public and the businesses and logistics, things that depend on our transportation systems and our roads working and transit and everything else. But also the public's been prepared to invest through Measure E, a non-trivial amount of Measure E at $500,000 a year, in addition to the Measure J and K funding that touched a large number of roads across this city, starting 14 years ago. So this is we're grappling with this now. I will say the general target I'm supportive of. The staff report's got a little bit of magical thinking. Possible sources are this one in the general fund, comma, without impacting other programs. That's not true. I mean, there's any of these, Measure E, Measure K, General Fund, all of this, there is and will continue to be an incredible amount of competition for all of those. Anything that we have discretion over is going to impact other programs. I mean, because we're facing, the severity of this challenge is dwarfed by the severity of our CalPERS challenge. We have both of these, and we have got to meet our levy needs. I mean, we got a lot of things that affect our finances, both new demands, but also just the cost increases that are caused by a variety of these other factors. So. I think that as we're being fully transparent, I don't want to be publishing things that make it appear as though this is basically free. That we don't have to make hard choices. We do, to accomplish $6 million a year. We are going to have to make some hard choices, and other things that we want to do as a council and as a community won't happen in order to prioritize this. This is true in a wide variety of the topic areas that we're taking up. Having said that, though, I think that it's an important target to shoot for. It doesn't reach perfection, as you've said, but it's a good metric for us to be able to judge our own performance, to be able to shoot for in the budget, and as you say, to be able to communicate to residents about what's possible and also what's not possible. That we can't bring every road up to Village Parkway every single year. It's not within the realm of possibility. Just like there's a lot of things in my house that I'd like to fix up, and I get through them. I have a plan, but I don't have unlimited resources, and neither do the city. So I think this is a good start. And the split between the notion of creating this neighborhood preservation approach and a community investment approach, I think, is very smart and very helpful to make sure that we're meeting both of those needs independently. The work that's going on with the state streets, coming up is an important example of that. State Street's often one of the most severe deficits that we have in the city in terms of road rehabilitation, and so focusing both on the neighborhoods and on the essential common citywide infrastructure that everybody uses, and that's also essential to our economic competitiveness is critical. So identifying both of those as distinct programs and at the funding levels that you've described, I think makes sense. Councilmember Guerrero?
Yes, and I've also thought about the funding sources and the competition and looking at how else we can use those funding sources. In pretty expensive concepts in there, but I understand that it's good to at least have a real good plan in the future, as you described, that maybe we can draw down some grants at some point. And it's important to especially the residents that are mostly impacted, where the quality of the road there is pretty bad. In speaking with the voters and others in the most impacted residential areas, that was their priority, is to get the roads paved, and in some areas, some safety issues where if there's a park and there's access ways for kids, they want to be able to provide some way to make sure that cars are slowing down in those areas. So to the extent that if we're looking at paving some roads, to also take into consideration some areas where we can slow the cars down in the future. So just paving and adding in some interest in in those areas. But it is expensive to do this, and I think that we're not the only city, as the mayor described, the only city struggling with this. But at least you put down everything on paper, and just continuing to educate the city that this is not cheap. It's going to come at a cost, and it's going to have an impact on other services as well. And how, prioritizing what it is that we like to take care of first. Mm-hmm. Public safety, is going to be, my priority first, and then, addressing other areas is, I think that, we have not met those areas, moving forward. So like looking at the most impacted areas first, and aggressively pursuing grants where we can so that we can meet those significant impacted areas.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for this thoughtful plan. I mean, it's a program, and with thanks to the voters of Measure E and then the voters who've supported SB 1 by voting no against the recusal, right, allows us to move forward on this. I never think about that for a second. Allows us what we had contemplated 2 years ago or whatever it was, and how we would use this money and why. And I think that's you started off that way, obviously, with the kind of it's important to put in perspective what we're talking about, right, and to maintain the roads as they are. About $12 million a year, which we all wish we had, but this is all initiated by the fact that our main funding source for that has been for our roads has been our road fund, which is not generating revenues anywhere near it used to be. If right, it's just not going to be able to support what we do, and that's not anything we've done or anything. As the mayor pointed out, every city is dealing with this because the revenues aren't coming through, gas taxes and whatever. So and this is why we wanted to make sure Measure E was part of the solution. I mean, we know neighborhoods, residents, businesses all depend on just the level of service to kind of maintain to maintain their driving habits and moving goods from throughout the city, or to be able to bicycle on. And those are, I think that expectation, and while I think we all expect it, we just had to commit and invest to this, and so really I applaud the fact that we've able to implement those dollars in a way, in a programmatic fashion, to know that every year we can expect some level of improvements in some part of the city and as part of the neighborhood. I just really think that's important to know that we're going to improve some part. It can't be all. We don't have that much dollars. I think I'd be happy to talk with residents about that expectation. I think the TMI Commission thought we should do that, but it's not feasible. But we have a program, we can manage it. So it also begs the thought, and as the mayor has been sending letters to our future selves and future staff, but this is exactly why we have to rethink how we grow as a city. And the debate was pretty rich, was the word tonight, this past fall and last year around the future of the city. And I got lots of feedback from folks in Southport around the roads and around traffic conditions. And I commute to, and I'm starting to again, and I see it. But building more roads isn't always the answer, because we got to care for them. And the emphasis on mobility and transit and all those things to help people move more efficiently in the areas we have. And as we move forward, this is just a kind of what we have is a plan to care for what we have.
Yep.
Right? And as we think about growth, it can't be more roads. So and the future's not going there anyway, just by car sales and the fact that they're declining. People are resizing that in that space. It's just going to be different, and so it will cause us to recalibrate our thinking on, on kind of where we need more roads, because it's just another very expensive piece of infrastructure we have to maintain. When are there other solutions? Can we manage this in other ways? And so again, I just want to put that out there. I think that's one of the clear messages we're sending back to ourselves as we move forward, because this is it. I mean, then we're trying to pay for, basically 20 to 30 years of growth and making sure we have roads. And the folks in the state streets who I know are going to feel a tremendous amount of relief once we get some of this measuring money on and do the project this spring, right? We launched that, some of the projects we're doing there. It will allow people to kind of feel confidence that they have that going. So, again, I'm supportive of this going forward.
Just a comment on the state streets. It's going to be the water and sewer improvements in that location first before we try to tackle the roadway.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
All right, Councilmember Sandin.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And I think last time I shared that this was incredibly sobering.
Yes.
And it's sobering because I think we're faced with, if we have a baseline even with grants that aren't predictable of $3 million, and we have a decline over 10 years, spending $30 million more dollars keeps us, if we can find the funding, keeps us as it is. And as it is now, we're not in stellar road shape. We actually have lots of, as evidenced by the diagrams, have a lot of issues. And it's interesting for me, just as a thought exercise, to think about what we could be doing with the $30 million for the city. So I think it is a real, again, sobering issue. I think we do have to be creative. I think people expect to have us think about and grapple with trying to keep the roadways and in as good of shape as they can possibly be. I think people expect that, and that we'll make hard decisions and figure that out. And I know what we see is a point in time, because since the diagrams of the streets, I know, for example, Davis Road has been redone, and so that's now probably gone from a red to a green or yellow to a green. But another road has gone from a green to a yellow. So I think everything's so malleable, and now with the rains, more things will be exposed. So I think our challenge is to figure out, okay, we have a baseline of 3. We're looking at having declining grades, but what could we do if we had $1 million more, or $2 million more, or $3 million more? So I think we have to be a little more flexible than just saying 3 and 6, because there might be a ratio of 3 for the community investment program to $1 for the neighborhood preservation program. And as we're going up, perhaps there's some kind of ratio. I just think we need to be careful as we're moving forward, but we also need to be creative and kind of push the edges about what's possible for us to maintain the pavement quality. I just think people expect that they're going to drive down the road and it's going to be fine, and we know we're not hearing that, especially with the Zen City reports you mentioned. I think the team does a great job. I've heard wonderful things. Someone put something on West Sac Connect and it gets fixed, or they get, so kudos to the team for doing that. And I know it's just one thing after another. It doesn't stop. It's one pothole and then another one gets fixed and another one pops up. But thank you for having us have to, not that this is our favorite thing to do, but have to actually grapple and try to figure out the path forward. I don't think it's easy.
Mayor Pro Tem Orozco? Did you?
I wrote that down, Councilmember Sandin, that's sobering, reading this report. And it just makes a great case for why it is that we need to really promote alternative transportation modes. I mean, I'm not a non-believer 3 years ago to a point where I think, okay, now I got to count the consideration of our roadways in addition to clean air and exercise and other things that go along with riding a bike. Again, it's my hope is that the trajectory will change, and that maybe we'll have something a little bit better if we start seeing people more on scooters and on jump bikes and on, using VIA for these short trips within the city. But I mean, we can't ignore the fact that these roads are expensive, and the buses that are traveling around here with, 3 heads at most in them, or the fact that we have, a history of being a trucking city. I mean, that's a reality that West Sacramento has to face, that may not be going away anytime soon. soon. But, it's crazy to think that $1 million in this realm doesn't buy us very much. And yet the price tag that we can't afford already is only going to buy us a status quo. So I appreciate the work you're doing, and I do look forward to hearing what's happening in the state streets. I have many neighbors that are interested in that answer, and along with, as we navigate, the other improvements in that area, including Memorial Park.
Yeah, we've talked about the overall condition map, and I've seen, at SACOG, I've seen these same basic maps for a bunch of other jurisdictions, and I do think that the silver, maybe the bright spot on our map is that for most neighborhoods, actually, if you look for most of the neighborhoods in the city, whether it's Bridgeway Lakes, Bridgeway Island, the Lynn and Loop area, the northeast village of Southport, Broderick, the road condition is actually not bad. The neighborhoods are mostly green and blue on our maps. Where we struggle the most are the State Street, well, the old West Sacramento other than Westmore Oaks. So State Streets, Westfield, and some of those neighborhoods, and then industrial and rural. Well, rural is extraordinarily common, right? I mean, Yolo County has an official return to gravel program and policy. I mean, it's that bad. I mean, they've simply determined that for some rural roads, the only viable option is to allow them to revert to essentially dirt roads, right? That's the rural solution in some other in other places, because rural roads are expensive to maintain, and the others are in the industrial zone where we have a large amount of trucking. But the daily experience in neighborhoods is not nearly, is actually quite good. And so it's a more nuanced picture. Now, the industrial piece is really important, and these tend to be arterial roads that are also used by commuters and others as well, so they're not only used for industry. It's extraordinarily important, but there's also a lot of good on this map, and that reflects a lot of the work that's been done and a lot of the investments that the community has been making over time. So I completely agree with the comments about, we should be looking not just in 3 million increments, but, being real. And this is useful to point us in that direction, but we need to have a plan in all those dimensions. And then we do, as we were talking about in the last item, we do have to be building less pavement. And we have to, other departments have to start incorporating them in their work as well. I mean, I think, as I'm looking at the zone on the map, and we have in that zone we have the old River Park subdivision is in that zone. We have Yarborough, we have Liberty, we have a variety of other projects that will that would bring online a whole new set of pavements and roads, and whose currently anticipated community facilities districts, I'm imagining based on what the report is, aren't going to be sufficient to fully cover their maintenance. We are going to have to start that's going to have to start being a decision about whether or not we move forward with projects like that. Right, so it can't only, Public Works is not going to be able to solve this problem all by itself. You're going to have to, you are doing your job, and you and Finance, the city manager's office, are going to, through teeter fees, are going to, figure out how to solve as much as possible. But the biggest elements of this, to some extent, are going to be driven by some of our planning decisions, which I think is what Councilmember Lidison was saying earlier as well. So. I think we need to find a way not just to write a letter to the future councils, but even to ourselves for the next meeting about actions that we have up on zoning or whatever. Almost every. I'm not suggesting we add an agenda component, but it's almost as though, in addition to coordination and budget and finance and strategic plan integration, we almost are going to need to have a section of each agenda item that says, what is the impact of this on our pavement rehabilitation exposure. I mean, it has gotten to that stage where we're gonna have to deal with the demand side too, and not just the funding. So, all right, is it workshop only? Did you get sufficient feedback? The answer is pretty much always yes.
Got all the feedback I needed.
He's thinking about it.
Dennis is saying yes, so I'm gonna, okay, he'll fill you in. All right, thanks, Jesse. Thanks so much. All right, that brings us into council calendar. Berlin?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. A few items that are coming up in the next few weeks. Tomorrow night is the West Sacramento Chamber of Commerce installation dinner. That'll be, I'm sure you saw the tables getting set up downstairs, so that'll be here tomorrow at 5:30. And then on January 24th, that's next Thursday, the Recreation Center is celebrating their 10-year anniversary with a celebration at the Recreation Center, and that starts at 6 o'clock. And then we are hosting an ethics training for anyone who needs to get their ethics certification, mainly for boards and commissioners, but it's open to any employees that would like to attend, and that's January 29th, January 29th, which is a Tuesday at 6 p.m., and that's going to be in the council chambers.
Amanda?
Yes.
Does that satisfy is it AB 1275 requirement? And how long is it?
AB 1234.
Thank you.
Yes.
It does?
2 hours.
2 hours.
Jeff Mitchell will be
Most exciting 2 hours that you will ever
our
spend.
featured presenter.
Well, the alternative is doing a video one.
Which
takes about 8
believe it or not,
hours.
is actually worse.
I don't know.
And speaking of boards and commissions, on February 19th, there's the Boards and Commissions orientation, and then that's at 4 o'clock. And that's all I've got.
All right, any questions on the calendar? City manager report?
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, while she's still here, I know the council already knows this, but for the public, wanted to acknowledge and congratulate again Tracy Michael, our new Parks and Recreation Director. She was appointed just before the break. And we'll be also highlighting that at the Parks, or the Recreation Center celebration as well. So looking forward to that. I did want to touch on just one item of note. We talked about the governor's budget tonight. We also talked about bonding. And I know the council's been tracking this issue, but in the governor's budget, if you haven't looked at page 94, I encourage you to, if you only look at one page, page 94 in the governor's budget is really relevant to us. It proposes to eliminate the bond vote requirement for EIFD bonds. As you know, being one of only a few EIFDs in the state, that's a big issue for us. First in the state, one of three, first of three. The bond issue is a huge deal for us if we can get this through, whether it's through the governor's budget or a bill that I'm going to talk about. It would be really the last hurdle to making the EIFD tool the most useful tool that we hoped it would be. And then the parallel to that is I spent today at CalEd's in my role as incoming chair of CalEd at our Ledge Roundtable, where there were a couple of different state electeds there. One of them being Senator Bell, who has introduced a bill that would do the same thing. So it's called the bill is called or it's SB 128. It essentially does in print what the governor's budget proposes to do. So we'll be tracking that as we go forward, looking at either the actual budget or this bill. Expect a future item to support that bill in the meantime. So that's my report.
Aaron?
Do you need an item for that?
We'll have to review the ledge policy. The city has the policy, so I think we're in alignment on that one. So maybe it's something we can be a little more nimble on.
Okay, Councilmember Guerrero.
Yes, could you also, if you're taking a look at the bill as well, maybe the budget item, because the budget item would move forward faster and be approved by you?
Yeah, absolutely. What we don't know yet is what vehicle it will end up being. Sometimes, as you know, with the May revise, we learn more. If it's still in there, likely end up in a trailer bill.
Trailer bill, yeah.
Right, but if not, well, in the meantime, we want to support SB 128 and be on record for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions for city manager? It's actually quite a lot in the governor's budget to take a look at.
There is.
So besides page 94. 91, yeah, so maybe at a future council meeting, we'll get to review. So, okay, city attorney report?
Nothing to report.
Staff direction for members of the council?
If I may, just a question with the federal budget, federal government shutdown. Have there been any impacts to any one of our operations as a result of that? And you can take that offline with a memo. But I'm just wondering if there's been any be it payments to any levee repair. I don't think any of that was impacted part of the shutdown, but I'm just curious to see if that has affected us at
Yeah,
this
but
point.
we can look into that. The only one I know of so far is HUD being shut down, if it has some effect on our CDBG program. But other than that, we can follow up on that one.
Thank you.
I haven't heard, though.
Well, and on, what about Section 8 vouchers and stuff, other system, for our residents that, who are receiving some form of?
Right, I was only speaking to city operations. We can check in with our county partners and see if there's been any adverse effects there.
Okay. All right, and we don't have any future agenda item requests, so is there a motion to adjourn? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.